پتھر تھا جس کے ساتھ وہ پرندے بنا کر زندہ کیا کرتے تھے۔ اس کا یہ بھی ماننا تھا کہ یہ پتھر عیسیٰ اور ان سے پہلے کے انبیاء کے پاس بھی تھا، جس کی وجہ سے ان کی عمریں اتنی لمبی لمبی ہوا کرتی تھی۔ اور ان لوگوں کے انبیاء پر یہ الزامات تو ہر دور اور ہر عہد میں لگتے آئے ہیں، اور قرآن پاک میں تو جگہ جگہ ان کے ایسے الزامات کا ذکر ہے کہ جب ان کے سامنے ہماری واضح نشانیاں آئیں تو کہنے لگے کہ یہ تو جادو ہے۔ سورہ یونس، سورہ ہود، سورہ نمل، سورہ قصص، سورہ سبا، سورہ صافات، سورہ زخرف، سورہ احقاف، سورہ قمر، سورہ صف، سورہ مدثر، بلکہ سورہ صف والی آیات تو میں نے آپ کو بتایا تھا کہ بالخصوص عیسیٰ علیہ السلام کے معجزات کے بارے میں، کہ جب عیسیٰ ابن مریم ان کے پاس واضح نشانیاں لے کر آئے تو وہ کہنے لگے کہ یہ تو صاف صاف جادو ہے۔ بالکل اسی طرح زوسیموس نے بھی حضرت عیسیٰ علیہ السلام کے مٹی کے پرندوں والے معجزے پر الزام لگایا کہ ان کے پاس وہی جادوئی پتھر تھا کہ جس سے وہ پرندے زندہ کیا کرتے تھے، اور ایسے ہی ایک جادوئی پتھر کا کانسیپٹ الکیمسٹس کے درمیان آگے چل کر پارس پتھر کے نام سے مشہور ہوا۔ پارس پتھر ہجر الفلسفہ، فلاسفر سٹون، جس کی خصوصیات میں پیدائشی بیماریوں کو ٹھیک کرنا، مردہ پودوں کو زندہ کرنا، ایسے لیمپس بنانا کہ جو ہمیشہ جلتے رہیں، عام قیمت والے پتھروں کو مہنگے جوہرات میں بدل دینا، اور پارے یا مرکری جیسی کسی عام دھات کو سونے اور چاندی میں تبدیل کر دینا شامل ہوگا۔ اور آپ یہ نہ سمجھیے گا کہ ان لوگوں کا پارس پتھر پر یقین صرف ماننے کی حد تک ہوتا تھا۔ انفیکٹ 16ویں صدی میں فرانس سے ایک نام سامنے آیا تھا، نکولس فلیمیل، کہ جو کہ ایک ریئل شخص گزرا ہے۔ وہ الکیمیکل طریقے سے ایک ایسا پتھر بنانے کے لیے ساری زندگی کوشاں رہا کہ جس کے چھونے سے پارا سونے میں تبدیل ہو جائے اور جس کے رس سے ایک لمبی عمر حاصل کی جا سکے۔ نکولس فلیمیل اور دوسرے الکیمسٹس نے 2 ایسے پتھروں کے بارے میں بڑی ڈیٹیل کے ساتھ لکھا ہے کہ جو اپنے ساتھ مکس کیے جانے پر دوسرے ایلیمنٹس کی پراپرٹیز بدل دے۔ ایک سفید اور ایک گہرے سرخ رنگ کا پتھر جو دیکھنے میں اپنے وزن سے کہیں زیادہ وزنی ہوتا ہے۔ رہی بات سونا بنانے کی، تو سونا اس دنیا کا ایلیمنٹ ہے ہی نہیں۔ سونا ستاروں کے اندر پیدا ہوتا ہے، اور اس زمین پر آج جتنا بھی سونا ہے وہ سب ستاروں کے پھٹنے سے زمین پر آیا تھا۔ زمین پر سونا سنتھیٹیکلی بنایا تو جا سکتا ہے، لیکن اسے بنانا آسان نہیں ہے۔ اس وقت سوئٹزرلینڈ میں موجود دنیا کی سب سے بڑی مشین LHC یعنی لارج ہیڈرون کولائیڈر، ایک پارٹیکل کولائیڈر ہے۔ اس کے اندر سونے کے ایٹمز بنائے تو جا سکتے ہیں، لیکن اس میں اتنا ٹائم لگے گا کہ 200 گرام سونا بنانے سے پہلے ہی شاید قیامت آ جائے۔ میں نے آپ کو کہا تھا کہ میں آپ کو ہرمیٹیکا کلیکشن میں موجود ایک ایسی کتاب کے بارے میں بتاؤں گا کہ جو پودوں کی خصوصیات سے متعلق ہے، اور میں نے آپ کو اس چیپٹر کے شروع میں یہ بھی بتایا تھا کہ اس چیپٹر کی بعض باتیں آپ کے لیے ناقابل یقین بھی ہو سکتی ہیں، حالانکہ وہ سچ ہوگی۔ اور اب جو میں آپ کو بتانے والا ہوں وہ انہی ناقابل یقین لیکن سچی باتوں میں سے ایک ہے۔ میڈیٹرینین سمندر کے علاقے میں ایک جڑی بوٹی ملتی ہے جسے مینڈریک یا پھر مینڈراگوڈا کہتے ہیں۔ یہ ایک جڑ ہے یعنی روٹ، لیکن یہ کوئی عام جڑ نہیں ہے۔ اس جڑ کی شکل و صورت حیرت انگیز حد تک انسانوں سے ملتی ہے، اور اسی لیے یہ جڑ الکیمسٹس کی توجہ کا ایک طویل عرصے سے مرکز رہی ہے۔ اس کی خصوصیات بھی بہت عجیب ہیں۔ اس میں ایسے ایکٹیو بایولوجیکل الکلائڈز ہوتے ہیں کہ جو بہت آسانی سے نشے کی سی کیفیت پیدا کر سکتے ہیں، ہیلوسینیشنز دکھا سکتے ہیں، یعنی وہ مناظر جو حقیقت ہو ہی نہ۔ اس کے کھانے سے آنکھوں کی پتلیاں پھیل جاتی ہیں اور انسان بے ہوش تک ہو جاتا ہے۔ یہ ساری وہ علامات ہیں جو بڑی آسانی سے اس جڑی بوٹی کے متعلق ایک ماورائی تاثر پیدا کرنے کے لیے کافی ہے، اور الکیمسٹس کی کتابوں کے اندر آپ کو جگہ جگہ اس جڑ کا ذکر ملے گا۔ عیسیٰ علیہ السلام کے فوراً بعد اس جڑی بوٹی کا استعمال بہت زیادہ دیکھنے میں آیا۔ انفیکٹ یروشلم میں اس کا استعمال تقریباً کامن ہو گیا تھا، یہاں تک کہ مورخ جوزفس فلاویس نے بھی اس کا ذکر اپنی اینٹیکوٹیز میں کیا ہے کہ لوگ اس جڑی بوٹی کو ہاتھ نہیں لگاتے تھے۔ وہ اس کے گرد ایک ایسا گڑھا کھود دیتے تھے کہ اس بوٹی کا انسان جیسا دھڑ نظر آنے لگ جاتا تھا۔ پھر اس جڑ کو ایک رسی سے باندھ کر رسی کا دوسرا سرا کتے کے ساتھ باندھ دیتے اور کتے کو اپنی طرف آنے کا اشارہ کرتے۔ اس طرح کتے کے رسی کھینچنے سے یہ جڑی بوٹی زمین سے باہر نکل آتی۔ लेकिन ये सब बताने का मकसद महज आपको दिलचस्प और मज़ेदार बातें बनाना नहीं है, बल्कि आपके सामने एल्केमी की बुनियाद को एक्सप्लेन करना है, क्योंकि 13वीं सदी में एल्केमी के इल्म में एक ऐसी चीज़ आकर मिल गई थी जो पारस पत्थर, मैंड्रेक और एलेक्सीर से कहीं ज़्यादा ख़तरनाक थी, और वो थी कबाला, यहूदियों का सदियों पुराना जादू।
What if you were the one who wronged them? Perspective helps you grow and realize how you could have been better. When you begin to reflect on yourself, you might see you were the one wronging where you once thought you were being wronged. Or that you were the oppressor where you once thought you were oppressed. In all those moments where you thought you were the victim, you may find that you were in fact the aggressor. These flashes of insight are a gift from Allah who guided you to realize your wrongs. There's a powerful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he mentions 3 men that get stuck in a cave. And at the entrance of that cave, there's this huge boulder. And all 3 of them say to each other, let's make dua to Allah with the deed that we did sincerely for His sake in hopes that He'll remove the boulder. Now I want you to pay attention to the second man who makes dua and what exactly he says. He says, Allahumma innaha kanat li bintu ammin ahbabtuha ka'ashaddi ma yuhibbu rijalu nisa. Oh Allah, I had a cousin of mine that I fell in love with, and I loved her deeper than any man could love any woman. فَطَلَبْتُ مِنْهَا فَأَبَتْ. And then I asked her to be with me and she refused. And then she goes into deep debt. And he says, I manipulated her by taking advantage of her desperation and telling her, look, I'll give you 100 dinars if you do what I want you to do. So she agreed in her desperation. So he says, فَلَمَّا وَقَعْتُ بَيْنَ رِجْلَيْهَا قَالَتْ يَا عَبْدَ اللَّهِ اتَّقِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تَفْتَحِ الْخَاتَمَ إِلَّا بِحَقِّهِ.
The last thing you'd expect when you're hiking through the woods is to stumble upon a legendary flying ship. But maybe that's only because you haven't done enough hiking around ancient Asian ruins. I sure haven't. It's November 2017 near the village of Asuka, southeast of Osaka, Japan. Travel vlogger Doug Merritt is filming his trek through the surrounding hills and forest when he arrives at his destination.
I think I see it right in front of me. Wow. It's actually bigger than I expected.
His video shows a gigantic stone structure rising above the dense forest floor on a hillside. There's an indentation down the middle with 2 rectangular holes on either end. Made of solid granite, the carved mound is 36 by 26 feet and stands 15 feet high.
The stone seemed to be out of place there at the top of the hill. It was just sitting there, appearing to have just fallen from the sky out of nowhere.
Mars researcher George Haas says this 800-ton carved boulder is known as Masuda no Iwafune, which means the rock ship of Masuda. Some believe it's tied to a Japanese legend put into writing in the early 1800s.
A group of fishermen noticed an unusual spacecraft landing in the distance in the water. The ship came to shore, a door opened, and they could see a lovely woman coming out of the spacecraft. And she started speaking to them in a language they had never heard before. And as soon as she got there, she got back into the craft and flew away, never to be heard of again.
So is the rock ship of Masuda a carving to commemorate this encounter? Some believe it looks like the hollow ship drawings. But most think it's a lot older, dating to Japan's Old Mound period between 250 and 500 AD. During that time, in the same area as the rock ship, The ancient Japanese built several giant keyhole-shaped formations. And here's where it gets weird. George Haas says similar formations are found in one other place, Mars. Look at them side by side. The photo on the right was taken by NASA.
This structure on Mars is completely symmetrical. It's a keyhole formation with a circular mound at the top and a triangular form at the bottom.
Is there a connection between this part of Japan and the Red Planet? Something that had cosmic visitors interested in both? The Valley of Asuka, where the rock ship and these tombs are found, is considered the birthplace of Japanese civilization. Many cultural transformations, including the introduction of Buddhism, began there around 500 AD, but little is known about the era before that. So what can our experts dig up? Archaeologist Dr. Ed Barnhart considers if the rock ship of Masuda could have anything to do with the legend of the hollow ship.
There's a whole myth around this magical woman. It was actually documented in 3 historic texts that talked about the same story.
Still, Barnhart agrees the formation is much older than the rock ship legend of the early 1800s. He joins other experts who place its creation to that period of ancient Japan when the keyhole formations were built. Barnhart adds that those strange keyholes on Mars are most certainly the result of natural forces like erosion, while the Japanese keyholes are man-made tombs.
This is a very religiously steeped area, and at a time period called the tumulus period, there were a number of stone-built and carved tombs in the area. So this may fall into that tradition.
Okay, then since the rock ship of Masuda was found near these tumulus-era burial mounds, could it also be a tomb? Anthropologist Kathy Strain investigates.
What we do know is that this area was used a lot during the Great Burial Period. And so it's quite possible that this was the start of a burial and it ended up getting abandoned because it got a crack in it. So then it's not perfect anymore.
But Barnhart has another idea. It relates to the ancient practice of fermenting rice to make the brewed alcohol sake.
There's another stone in the area called the sake boat stone that has a variety of circular holes and canals that functionally could be used in the process of sake making, skimming the top of one, making it more pure in the other ones as the canal feeds the process through. This one is very different, though. The holes are deep. There's only 2 of them. They don't actually align up very well to let one skim the other.
It's an interesting theory, but at this point, that's all it is. There's no evidence for the tomb or the sake theory, either in the written or archaeological records. All we have is the stone and our best guesses. Our verdict, it is still unknown exactly who carved this mound and why. The legend of the hollow ship UFO also remains a nazo. That's Japanese for mystery. But there are enough independent accounts of it that we're not ruling out a close encounter of the Japanese kind. Summer 2020 in the state of Tabasco in southern Mexico. Archaeologists are surveying the land from above, armed with a new technology called LiDAR. It stands for Light Image Detection and Ranging. Laser beams are sent to the ground and bounce back, creating a digital map of areas hidden for centuries by thick, dense vegetation. The team is working in the remote jungles when their LiDAR detectors uncovered this. It's a series of images which appear to be a city containing rectangular plazas and platforms with distinct lines and edges. So remember, this isn't a photo, it's a laser image of the jungle from above, enabling us to see what's covered by the canopy and underbrush. So take a look at these rectangles. Here, here, and then we've got a large one here. Some of them are nearly a half-mile long. And then take a look at these lines here. I'm just wondering, I could be wrong about this. Could they be roads? Dr. Takashi Inomata led the team that made the discovery.
It was really great, particularly those perfect rectangular shaped site. That's something we were not expecting.
Writer Eric Grundhauser says some have speculated it's a famous legendary lost city.
These structures and the mysteries surrounding them really harken back to some older legends of lost cities, of the idea of El Dorado.
El Dorado was a legendary city filled with gold that the Spanish conquistadors heard rumors about while exploring the New World in the 1500s. Many died in their unending quest to find it, including the English courtier Sir Walter Raleigh, who was beheaded for battling the Spaniards during the fruitless search. Yet another theory about this site is that it's evidence of the oldest civilization known to Mesoamerica.
These structures could possibly have been created by the Olmec civilization. There are only two other major sites where we know the Olmec to have lived.
The Olmec date between 1600 and 350 BC, hundreds of years before the more well-documented Inca, Mayan, and Aztec empires. It's still unclear how and why their civilization vanished.
We thought we already knew about many of those big sites. Some of them are almost kilometer long, and then they have perfect rectangular shape, which was surprising.
So, who really made this large site, and why? Based on the images and Olmec-style rock carvings found recently in Morelos, Mexico, some speculate this could have been used for religious rituals like human sacrifice. These and similar artworks suggest Olmec leaders ritually killed captives of war and other elites to gain the favor of the gods. Although the fate of the Olmec is unknown, one thing is definitely clear. LiDAR is the future of archaeology. In fact, another recent LiDAR find uncovered this 1,500-year-old urban settlement in the Bolivian Amazon. More evidence that cultures we've always thought of as undeveloped were actually more sophisticated than we ever imagined. But are these ruins in Mexico the remains of the Olmec civilization or something else? Let's see what our experts can dig up. Archaeologist Dr. Ed Barnhart says it's unlikely this could be the ancient lost city of El Dorado, as some have speculated, since the Mexican state of Tabasco, where it's located, is not known for gold deposits. But maybe instead it has something to do with the search for liquid gold.
Mexico's national oil company, Pemex, has been intensively working in there. So it's possible that some of those things that look ancient might be overgrown Pemex platforms.
But as he looks more closely, Barnhart recognizes the pattern of these structures as something familiar to archaeologists.
This entire thing was once a big platform with buildings and probably big sculptures as well. We're talking about huge areas upon which the Olmec put their cities.
Anthropologist Kathy Strain points to another important clue.
It looks like mounds that we already know about that are at the two other complexes that we know are associated with Olmec. The Mayans came along later and they occupied a different place in that jungle. And so we know this was exclusively Olmec because of where it's located.
So we think it's Olmec, but we still don't know exactly what we're looking at or what purpose it served.
It is possible that this could represent a burial ground, but burial mounds tend to be small. What this could be is a platform for religious purposes. You would have the ruler at one end and a parade going up the middle, spectators on the sides.
A rendering of what this platform may have looked like demonstrates that the Olmec were likely the first Mesoamerican civilization with the engineering know-how to build such monumental stone structures.
But we won't know that information until we see what it looks like physically.
Now, of course, it's long been suggested that various Mesoamerican sites like the Nazca Lines in Peru were designed to communicate with or even guide extraterrestrial visitors. Mainstream archaeologists usually dismiss these theories, but even they remain mystified about this latest find.
Honestly, we don't know what they are. We don't know why they built this and what they mean.
Our verdict? Olmec archaeological site. But what it's for and why the civilization collapsed is still unknown. We do know that the Olmec invented calendars, created the system of mathematics, and they even had toothpaste. But the exact extent of their sophistication remains a secret covered by the jungle. It's February 2022 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The Museum of Osteology, also known as the Bones Museum, makes a post about one of its newest artifacts, and the photo of it has the comment section going wild. The image shows an elongated skull with a strange metal implant embedded inside it. The skull found in Peru appears to be human, but the odd stretched-out shape of the bulbous cranial bones could suggest otherwise. The implant itself is coarse and bumpy and is clearly not an organic part of the skeleton. It appears to be composed of two parts, an eye-like shape on top and a circle at the bottom. Forensic anthropologist Dr. John Verano, who studies prehistoric skulls like this for a living, was stumped when he first saw this image.
I've never seen anything like this. I looked at it and I said, well, it doesn't look genuine to me.
Though this implant is rare, perhaps unique, author Heidi Halle says there's a long history of elongated skulls in Peru.
For us to be able to find elongated skulls, that's not the rare element here. Finding an elongated skull with a metal plate in it, now that takes the cake.
Peruvian archaeologist Julio Teo discovered hundreds of elongated cone-shaped skulls buried in the Paracas region in the late 1920s. And Hollis notes that their surprising appearance makes some wonder if they could have extraterrestrial origins.
In pop culture, we often do see aliens as being portrayed as having an elongated skull. From the popular Aliens movies to the gray aliens witnessed by people said to be abducted by alien beings.
Recent genetic testing of the Peruvian skulls apparently found they had mitochondrial DNA with mutations unknown to any human or animal on Earth. And the metal in the skull adds another bizarre dimension.
It's highly unusual to see such perfection done on something so ancient. How and who did this?
We often associate metallic objects with electronics, so maybe this skull implant is some sort of microchip, or in this case, macrochip, for aliens to communicate with their home planet. We know people microchip their pets to help locate them when they go missing. In the case of dogs and cats, a device the size of a grain of rice is implanted just under the skin, over the shoulder blades. Could this cranial implant actually attract aliens? Does it reveal other ancient secrets? Or is this just one big hoax taking us all for a wild ride? Let's ask the experts. We turn first to anthropologist Kathy Strain to disentangle fact from fiction.
There have been a lot of known hoaxes in archaeology, in particular with Peruvian skulls, crystal skulls that were found all over the world that were said to have been made by alien technology. Those were fakes. We know that they were cut by a jeweler's equipment, and so it's always possible that something can be hoaxed.
But Strain says there's reason to believe the skull is authentic.
We can see every element of what a human skull looks like. That is not easy to hoax, because bone is bone. We can also date this using radiocarbon, and so that would tell us for certain that it is 2,000 years old.
So since the skull seems to be real, could it actually belong to an ancient alien who visited Earth from another planet? Archaeologist Dr. Ed Barnhart says that though we associate elongated skulls with aliens, there's historical evidence that they are, in fact, human.
This shows what we call cranial deformation. And that means that probably when this individual was very young, boards were strapped to the skull so that it would elongate and change the shape of the skull. It was very prevalent in South America, where this skull is believed to have come from.
Barnhart says it was generally people of elite status from Andean cultures like the Paracas who underwent this practice. Yet we know some people who claim they've been abducted by aliens who say they had metal devices implanted into their bodies. So maybe these are actually alien implants into human abductees who've undergone skull elongation. Or is it possible these South Americans were able to also carry out other complex skull modifications like this?
We have found other skulls that have what we call trepidation and repairs to them. Trepidation is the practice of drilling or removing bone from a head that has undergone trauma. We know we still use this today. Roy from Siegfried and Roy, after he was attacked by the tiger, had to have this done because his brain swelled.
Strain says a recent amazing discovery in Peru in late 2021 may solve the riddle. These are obsidian surgical tools found in what's believed to be a doctor's grave. Strain says this proves ancient South Americans actually had the know-how to perform this dangerous procedure. Yet even though trepanation is a recognized ancient practice, John Verano still isn't convinced this implant is authentic, since he's never seen metal like this from that time.
If this skull with its metal implant is genuine, and if it really reflects surgery and implant, of course it would be a significant historic discovery, but given that it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen in metallurgy in the Andes, that's why I have my doubts.
So while John leans toward this being a hoax, there's plenty of other evidence to suggest this is the 2,000-year-old skull of a human who survived a life-threatening surgery. Our verdict? This skull is most likely an example of ancient trepanation. But until the skull is radiocarbon dated to confirm its age, concluding with absolute certainty that this artifact is authentic would be getting ahead of ourselves. It's July 2014 in the Indian state of Chhattisgarh, where there are a number of caves and paintings made by hunter-gatherer populations going back as far as 10,000 years. Archaeologist J.R. Bagad claims he recently made a unique discovery here.
और ये शैल चित्र में जो है लगभग 10,000 वर्ष पुराने आदिम मानवों के द्वारा निर्मित में शैल चित्र है.
While giving a tour to reporters, Bagad shows a rock face on which there are half a dozen dark red and yellow painted beings standing together in a group.
In this particular painting, which looks quite strange, we have some individuals with larger heads, different colored arms and hands, and they don't look like the other people depicted on these cave walls. So we have a lot of people believing that the ancient humans who painted these drawings were actually painting images of aliens from another world.
The theory that these are depictions of extraterrestrials is bolstered by another painting of what appears to be a mechanical-looking disc painted on the cave ceiling.
It resembles a saucer-shaped object, which became kind of the pop cultural representation of UFOs in the 1950s and 60s.
These aren't the only ancient representations of allegedly extraterrestrial beings.
We also have a number of other ancient civilizations who have created similar things. For instance, we have the Wajina figures in a rock shelter in Australia. We also have petroglyphs in Capitol Reef State Park here in the United States.
Let's take another look at this disc-shaped object from India. These three lines, right here, again right here, and right here, have alternately been described as beams or legs of a tripod, and these apparent portholes, right here and right here, match with contemporary representations of alien spacecraft. So what can our experts unearth about this peculiar cave art? First, anthropologist Kathy Strange says these ancient drawings must have marked a significant event or encounter.
They're not just doodles. Cave walls are very valuable. So for them to paint this, it must have been something important to them as a people. They're trying to represent something that they want to pass on to the next generation.
These bulbous-headed figures do indeed resemble the humanoid depictions of aliens that eventually dominated in the 20th century, so a connection seems possible. However, archaeologist Ed Barnhart believes they are documentation of a different kind of cosmic trip.
These ancient cultures relied upon people called shamans who would typically go into altered states of consciousness to receive information, and those were induced by hallucinogenic drugs or starvation or sleep deprivation. What they painted on the walls were their experiences they were having during their hallucinogenic trances. In those caves, they would feel like they're floating outside of their body, and they would show themselves elongated and the floor falling out below them.
It's not that the figures' heads were extra large, but that the bodies were stretched as they felt they were floating up. And as for the UFO-like object, that's also more likely something else from the heavens.
Instead of it being a beam from an alien ship, it actually is just sun rays, and they're projecting that the sun is at its full potential, probably noon right above your head. There's other examples in the general area in India and other places in the world that show a very similar object.
Our verdict? These well-preserved Indian rock paintings are most likely the work of shamans from prehistoric hunter-gatherer societies, who made them while in an altered state of consciousness. Even if these ancient artists weren't seeing aliens, they were definitely experiencing something truly out of this world. 1939, Dique Delta, Costa Rica.
The United Fruit Company was clearing an area of the Costa Rican jungle to start a banana plantation. And suddenly they discovered something truly mysterious.
At sites all across the area, workers uncover these. Stones that have been carved into near-perfect spheres of all sizes.
The largest one was 9 feet in diameter and 16 tons.
It would take an incredible amount of craftsmanship and masterful engineering to create, especially the large spheres.
Many of the stones are within 5% of being perfect spheres, a difficult task to execute precisely even when using calibrated machinery. This is a remarkable feat if carved from a larger rock by hand.
When the first Western people came to Costa Rica and saw these spheres, they had never seen anything like it.
Archaeologists believe they were carved by a tribe known as the Dikis, which flourished from AD 700 to 1500. They produced at least 300 of these stones. But the Dikis faded away hundreds of years ago, and how they made the stones disappeared with them. By the 1940s, local indigenous tribes believed the stones were of divine origin.
The native Costa Rican people believed that these spheres are actually from their god. Terra, who was the thunder god, used them with a blowpipe in defense of the native Costa Ricans.
They believed Terra shot the stones at the gods of wind and hurricanes to keep them at bay. Some have speculated that these battles between Terra and the other gods were actually a titanic shooting match between UFOs, with the stones some sort of spent weapon. They point to the sphere's near-perfect roundness as proof of alien creation. But if we assume humans made them, not gods, the question is why? In the 1930s and 40s, rumors spread they'd been made to store gold in the sphere's cores, so workers blew up several and found nothing. Another possibility is that the spheres serve a scientific purpose.
One theory that has been posited is that they are somehow a representation of our solar system, that they represent celestial bodies somehow.
They might have been placed to track the seasons or rolled around to reflect the shifting night sky. There's also a theory that an advanced civilization, even older than the Dikis, built an entire complex of cities here.
It wouldn't be a surprise if we uncover other temples or other places out there that we just haven't found yet that may represent an older civilization that was there.
Here's a twist. The Costa Rican stone spheres aren't alone. In 2016, an archaeologist uncovered this massive sphere in Bosnia. Then also, there are these in New Zealand. Let's see if our experts can solve this mystery without blowing anything up.
We turn to archaeologist Ed Barnhart, who has seen the spheres himself.
Most of them in Costa Rica now have been rolled into parks or they're in front of government buildings. It's part of the difficulty interpreting of what they are is the fact that they've all been rolled out of context.
So if they once lined up with the stars, sun, and moon, we will never know. Why people made them may remain a mystery, but Barnhart thinks he knows how they were made.
When I visited this location, I stopped on the bridge and looked down on the river, and I could see circular stones just like this. They're called concretions.
A concretion is when minerals build up around a core like a pebble and then over years layer on concentrically, creating a round hard rock. Geologists think this is exactly how the spheres in Bosnia and others around the world likely formed. But Barnhart sees the hand of man in just how smooth and round the Costa Rican stones are.
They weren't always perfectly circular, so they chipped it here, they chipped it there, and made it more circular.
It took hundreds, even thousands of hours of scraping and polishing. Then they had to roll these rocks, some weighing 15 tons, to their sites. Barnhart takes this as a sign of a dynamic, thriving culture. But what happened to this culture remains a mystery.
Those archaeological sites were once living cities. They were abandoned. Hundreds of years of forest came up, grew all around them.
So, for the stone spheres, we're crediting natural forces and human industry, most likely by members of the Dikis culture. But why people carved and placed the stones is still unsolved.
It's 1999 near Dnepr, Germany. Two German looters are ransacking the site of an archaeological excavation in Middelburg Hill when they come across a treasure trove of Bronze Age artifacts. They quickly sell the goods on the black market, and in 2002, a police raid on an art collection brings to light a truly unique item from the stash. Take a good look. This photo, taken after the loot was recovered, shows a 10-inch circular object about the size of a vinyl record. It's adorned with 32 golden circles, a larger circle, a crescent shape, and an arc on its circumference. A smaller arc on the left side has gone missing. There's a smaller rainbow-shaped golden arch upside down near the bottom. Science journalist Amy Title says this now famous object is known as the Nebra Sky Disk.
It's got a full circle and a crescent that looks like it's meant to be the sun and a crescent moon. And there's these two sides that could be marking seasons or could be marking a horizon. These smaller circles could potentially be stars.
Experts believe that it dates back to around 1800 BC. If it does in fact show celestial symbols, it could be the oldest star map known to man.
Many wonder if this isn't showing an older civilization having settled earlier than expected. If you were to lay this disc down on an altar, the arcs on the side would line up to show you roughly the equinox, which could tell you when you need to plant crops. One hypothesis about this disc is that it comes from a very advanced race living in the Bronze Age. For some, that leads to the question of whether or not they were somehow involved in alien technology, because these people were doing things that were far more advanced than any other cultures.
Others speculate that this disk has a connection to another mysterious source, a little-known Scandinavian sun cult whose name has been lost to history. Followers of this esoteric Nordic religion were sun worshippers who portrayed solar symbols frequently in rock carvings and other art. So let's see if our experts can shed some light on what, if anything, their beliefs could have to do with this sky disk.
There's ample evidence that ancient humans had knowledge of astronomy, as seen in famous sites like Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, and Chichen Itza, so they probably didn't need extraterrestrial help. But anthropologist Kathy Strain wonders if this artifact is connected to cultures known for their astronomical observations. Could the Nebra Sky Disk actually be an accurate star map?
We have the 7 sisters of the Pleiades right here, and it's an indicator that whenever the crescent moon was at this 3/4 and you could see the Pleiades, that you needed to add on to your calendar a leap month so that you could keep your agriculture correct.
But archaeologist Dr. Ed Barnhart isn't quite sure that's what we're seeing here.
One of the things that distinguish the Pleiades from some of the other stars is that they're less bright. If they were trying to depict a map of the sky, they would not make the Pleiades as bright and large as the other stars. Even just this sun and the moon here, it is physically impossible for this arrangement to be this close in a single view. It is not a map through which anyone could match it to the sky.
But since some claim this disk was able to keep track of the equinoxes, could it have been some sort of ancient calendar?
The smaller you try to make a circle like this to observe the sun, the more exact position you have to be in. Something this small a scale can't really function as an observatory.
Then is it possible this could simply be an elaborate piece of ancient artwork?
The fact that this is predominantly copper with bronze as kind of flare points towards it being an object of art. Copper is not good for making tools. If we look at all of the Bronze Age objects that we have, there are more pieces of art and jewelry than there are weapons and tools.
But given the object's sketchy origins, is there a chance this could just all be a hoax?
There are people who have claimed that the looters themselves created this as a hoax in order to get more money. However, the soil adhering to the back of it matched the exact location where the looters said they got it. And you cannot fake the patina that is on this bronze piece. We know it's very old based on that. So I personally don't believe that it is a hoax.
Our verdict, this is almost certainly an authentic ancient artifact depicting astronomical bodies. However, it is still up for debate whether it is the world's oldest star map or just a piece of decorative art.
In the Kimberley region of Western Australia, the Aboriginal people left intriguing paintings on cave walls. They are called the Wangina, incredible beings Aboriginals said created the world. Take a closer look. Do you see the round heads and circular eyes? According to George Haas, founder of the Cydonia Institute, the Wangina could be out-of-this-world evidence.
They have radiating feathers that come off the head. Some believe that when you first look at these, they scream alien. And the absence of mouths suggests that possibly these extraterrestrials were telepathic.
Wait a minute. Did he say aliens? It's an intriguing theory. What we do know is that Australian Aboriginal culture goes back 65,000 years and holds that humans were created by the Wangina. These unique paintings are a record of that period, which they call Dreamtime.
You don't see these type of images in other cave paintings done by Neanderthals and early man, which mostly deal with hunting and animals, deer, bison. But these paintings that we're seeing in Australia are totally unique.
In some tales, the Wangina are referred to as sky beings or spirits from the clouds who came down from the Milky Way and created the Earth and its people.
Some believe that these portraits of the Wangina certainly blur the line between extraterrestrial and spiritual world. They seem to have aspects of both.
When it comes to our origins, some speculate that ancient extraterrestrial visitors engineered the creation of modern humans through DNA manipulation or some other means. The paintings are intriguing. Look closely at the lines going across, creating sections on the body, here and here. Could this be the pattern of an ancient spacesuit? We asked our experts.
We begin with anthropologist Kathy Strain, who notes that if the paintings are an elaborate hoax, someone must have thought of it over a century ago.
They were documented by anthropologists more than 100 years ago. And outside the fact that you're adding some paint to keep the color alive, they haven't changed. These are not a hoax.
So if the pictures are real, are they of aliens? We ask archaeologist Ed Barnhart.
There are people who envision that it's helmets on their heads and suits on their bodies, but this is a very plodding-looking helmet. The kind of helmet that you see in 1950s aliens movies. It's kind of ridiculous to believe that an advanced civilization came here in suits that, in our current technology, are archaic.
And the idea that these designs on the bodies are spacesuits?
You're gonna see an image like this and envision suits on their bodies, but we do see today in Aboriginal ceremonies, people typically paint their bodies completely white, their faces, their hair, and then they'll put some kind of decoration over that. So I think that it is clearly connected to Aboriginal people who today paint their bodies in a very similar fashion.
In fact, Kathy Strain sees a clue in one image that convinces her these are strictly human bodies.
It is pretty rare to see genitalia of a male in rock art, and based on things that witnesses say that space aliens don't have genitalia, that's not how they reproduce, these look like human genitalia.
So what are we seeing?
The halo around the head, I don't believe that they intended it to be interpreted as anything other than it's the process of transforming, and that's your head kind of extending and above itself and continuing to carry out.
The halo has been used in many different cultures throughout history to represent spiritual transformation, including the Aboriginal Australians.
These images around the heads are some kind of symbol of the expansion of their minds and spirits.
So our verdict, these were likely humans. In fairness, you do have to ask, do the Aboriginal traditions of body decoration stem from a time when strange beings were observed? It's impossible to completely discount. But if these particular paintings were aliens, well, then let's just say they were endowed in a human way.
November 2020, the Red Rock Desert of southern Utah. A helicopter crew and state biologists are counting bighorn sheep when something catches their eye. They land and make this astounding discovery. A large, shiny silver object tucked into an almost inaccessible canyon.
It's just wild.
Look closer. From every angle, it's clear this thing does not belong here. Utah keeps its location secret, but news leaks out on social media, and it's quickly labeled the Utah monolith. U.S. Army vet David Serber takes all the secrecy as a challenge.
I'm like, okay, I'm gonna find this place, right? It was probably 11 p.m., and I drove for 6 hours straight through the night to try to get there.
David works his way deep into a canyon.
I don't see anyone.
Just after daybreak, he rounds a corner.
There she is.
And it's just there. I was like, oh God. And it was just a really cool experience to have a few minutes alone with it.
There are few things more iconic than a monolith. Whether we're talking about the monolith that started 2001: A Space Odyssey or the obelisks of ancient Egypt. So when this mysterious metal monument popped up, it really sparked people's imagination. The idea being that possibly one of the ways that aliens would contact us would be to leave an information-laden monolith for us to investigate and discover.
One focus on the internet was whether the monolith was constructed with alien building materials.
The belief was that they are comprised of something called a metamaterial or a metametal.
Metamaterials are engineered to have properties not found naturally on Earth. Special composites of metal strands and ceramics are created to absorb radar for stealth technology. And there are reports from reputed UFO crash sites that the craft contain alloys that give them anti-gravity and cloaking characteristics. Accounts of alien metamaterials went mainstream in 2017 with a New York Times article.
According to the New York Times report, Bigelow Aerospace was contracted by the government to store possible materials from alien craft.
It's believed that the U.S. government is studying these alien materials to create the next generation of weapons. Could the Utah monolith be made of the same sort of alien materials? David tests it.
I had a magnet with me, mainly because we were trying to figure out, what type of metal is it?
Not sticking.
And also, was it a solid object or was it hollow?
Not solid.
So what's it made of? And by whom?
Other mysterious monoliths have been discovered recently, often in remote locations, in Romania, the Isle of Wight, and Sweden. Are these objects some sort of alien calling card? Or could they be the product of a very creative and very human mind?
And when you first see this, you can't help but think of some type of extraterrestrial technology. However, there's nothing about what we're seeing in this video that leads me to believe it's manufactured from any kind of exotic material.
Unlike reports of UFO metamaterials, the monolith doesn't defy gravity, and it's definitely not cloaked. In person, David noticed fingerprint smudges and ragged corners, as well as other signs of terrestrial construction.
The telltale signs of those rivets would make me believe this is man-made, no matter how kind of anomalous its appearance is.
For McMillan, that's the giveaway, the signs of ordinary earthbound metalwork. If it is human-made, Kathy Strain has an idea why someone went through all the effort to put it in the middle of nowhere.
I think it's a message of beauty, of artwork, maybe makes you reflect more that I wanted to come here for the wilderness.
Some artists, like Donald Judd, believe that wilderness is the ultimate art gallery and use isolated locations for installation sites. But who made this and what it's made from is almost impossible to determine from a video.
Ultimately, you're not going to be able to determine exactly what this object is until you get it into a lab and under in-depth analysis.
But just as it appeared out of nowhere, the Utah monolith vanished, literally overnight. So until it's found and we can get it into a lab,
our verdict? This is not an alien artifact. It's either a human artwork or a hoax.
Either way, it's a compelling conversation piece.
Every day, the Earth receives visitors from outer space. Tons of space dust that mostly goes unnoticed. But sometimes larger objects can be seen streaking across the night sky. They are meteors. Only a few of these shooting stars survive the fiery descent through the atmosphere. For having withstood their ordeal, they are much reduced in size and given a new name, meteorites. Most of them are never found, but in 1954, one meteorite made its presence known in an extraordinary way. It happened in a small Alabama town, where Ann Hodges was taking an afternoon nap on her couch when she was awakened by a sharp pain on her left side. A meteorite had crashed through the roof, striking her. It is the only verified account of a meteorite ever hitting a person. Of course, bigger rocks have fallen out of the sky. 50,000 years ago, a 50-yard wide asteroid crashed into the ground and was vaporized in what is today the state of Arizona. All that was left was this 600-foot deep hole, the best preserved asteroid crater on Earth. And there's what happened to the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. That catastrophe not only wiped out the dinosaurs, but 3/4 of all of the then existing animal, marine, and plant species. Keeping track of asteroids and comets is a serious business, and it's an important aspect of the work the Jet Propulsion Laboratory performs as part of NASA's larger effort to protect our planet from cosmic marauders. As the saying goes, the dinosaurs didn't have a space agency.
Roger, on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
Fortunately, we do. Join the hunt for space rocks. Asteroids and comets are as old as our solar system. They formed 4.5 billion years ago in the midst of a swirling disk of interstellar gas and dust. As the cloud contracted, our star, the Sun, ignited.
You can imagine when the solar system first formed, it started off as a giant cloud of gas and dust that starts to kind of coagulate under the influence of gravity. Gravity starts pulling everything together.
This is how the rocky planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, came to be. They endured unceasing bombardments from other objects as they carved out orbital paths around the Sun. One of those collisions between the Earth and a Mars-sized object gave us our Moon. Further out, the giant gas planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune came into being. But even here, there was likely mayhem. Uranus may have suffered an enormous collision, one explanation for why it is permanently tipped over on its side, the only planet in our solar system existing in such a state.
Most of the mass ends up in planets or the sun, but there were little pieces left over. And eventually those pieces formed into what we know as asteroids and comets today.
While asteroids are leftover debris residing mostly between Mars and Jupiter, the vast majority of comets are to be found far beyond the orbit of Pluto. A region called the Kuiper Belt is believed to contain millions of them. And far more distant, surrounding the entire solar system, is a celestial sphere, the Oort cloud. Here, trillions of comets may reside. It's from these distant places that some comets find their way into our planetary neighborhood.
We now know that there's a sort of a cloud of icy, rocky bodies out there that are called long-period comets, or Oort cloud comets. These objects probably are remnants of the original gas cloud from which our solar system collapsed about 4.5 billion years ago. And they're still out there. Occasionally, they make their way into the inner part of the solar system, and they can come in, and then we see them as comets.
Compared to asteroids with their dark surfaces, comets are show-offs. For as a comet approaches the sun, dusty ices on its surface heat and light up, turning into a cloud of gas and dust, often having a trailing tail that can be millions of miles long. To the ancients, comets were viewed as harbingers of impending doom. But today, dread has been replaced by fascination. For these interlopers are relics, made up of the oldest and most pristine matter in our solar system. And it seems likely that we have to thank them for having brought to Earth long ago the elements that have allowed life to develop on our planet.
We know for certain that a pretty large asteroid or comet is responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs. So from that standpoint, they can be incredibly destructive. Of course, we wouldn't be here without that. Maybe we'd be walking lizard people, I don't know. But it's certainly true that life today is very much a product of an asteroid impact, a destructive one. On the flip side, we think that there's a very powerful role that these objects have played in the potential for building life on this planet and perhaps elsewhere. If we just start from the very beginning, which is the seed of an asteroid or comet, that tiny grain becomes a site where molecules can meet and form more complicated molecules. So they become nucleation sites for chemistry to occur. So you can start with simpler things, even like 2 hydrogen atoms, but eventually those build longer and longer chains of molecules, some of which can be very complex. And eventually, all of those complex chemicals can migrate to a planet. So we think that there's a role that comets and asteroids have played over billions of years in seeding our planet with some of the chemistry that it may have needed to eventually evolve life.
The best known of all comets is Halley. It revisits the Earth about every 76 years. Its 1986 appearance was a highly anticipated event. This was the first time, given the dawn of the space age, that it was possible to venture out and meet Halley. And no one was more excited about that possibility than the then new director of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Bruce Murray. Murray was intent on reinvigorating JPL, which he believed was becoming too cautious with missions he dismissed as being gray mice. He wanted, instead, for the lab to create daring new technologies used to explore destinations that would excite the public. These kinds of missions he labeled purple pigeons, for it would be impossible to ignore them. And for Murray, a mission to comet Halley, a once-in-a-lifetime event, was made to order. But any spacecraft sent out to meet Halley would have to overcome a major challenge.
Comets in general are in crazy orbits. Some are retrograde, some are highly inclined, so they are not easy targets to get to, especially if you want to get to them and pass them fairly slowly so that you can study them in detail. Halley's comet in particular was in a tough orbit to get to, and so there were various proposals on how to get into the right orbit.
Halley's retrograde orbit means that it circles the sun in the opposite direction of Earth's orbit. A spacecraft flying by Halley would be like 2 cars speeding past one another, offering little time for exploration. Any attempt to rendezvous and fly alongside Halley posed even greater challenges. But a radically new idea surfaced, designing a spacecraft to be propelled by the pressure of sunlight, solar photons, similar to how wind pushes a sailboat.
So you need an enormous amount of energy to slow down when you get there, stop. You need a huge amount of fuel. And the idea of the solar sail is that you would need the fuel because you could use changing solar pressure on the sail to handle your acceleration and deceleration. That's what made it such a really interesting, fascinating, and also problematic technology because it's not something anyone had ever done before. It was really a science fiction idea. It was kind of way out there, and lots of other JPL people thought it was nuts.
Two different concepts were put forth to capture the power of the sun. The most audacious of the two was called a heliogyro, a structure resembling a dozen helicopter blades stacked atop one another, each 4 miles in length. They were to use the sun to spin up to 200 times a second. In comparison, the solar sail seemed almost conservative. Astronauts were to deploy from the space shuttle a razor-thin sail stretching a half-mile in length on all sides. Murray was so taken with the solar sail that he enlisted colleagues, including his friend, the popular scientist Carl Sagan, to help drum up support for a Halley mission. It was an effort that reached from the halls of Congress to Hollywood.
Now, what would this do?
Well, it takes you to where you want to go. So one mission that's being talked about is to rendezvous with Halley's Comet in
I've always
1986.
wanted to do that.
Well, nobody's ever looked at a comet close up, and it lives mostly in the outermost part of the solar system. In fact, mostly lives between the stars. It's a piece of interstellar matter, and it'd be just fabulous to find out what it is. Also, this thing itself is, I think, tremendously exciting because, first of all, as it would be assembled in Earth orbit, it would be bright enough to see with the naked eye. Through a pair of binoculars, you could...
Solar sails and heliogyros were ideas far ahead of their time. But there was another purple pigeon whose development was further along. Solar electric propulsion, also known as ion propulsion.
Dr. Kenneth Atkins of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory described the advanced propulsion system.
Ion propulsion capability is 10 times as efficient as our conventional chemical rockets. And I think this is what gives us the capability to achieve a comet rendezvous.
When ion propulsion, like the solar sail, failed to gain traction, Murray next advocated a sample return mission, flying through the tail of Halley to capture some of its dust and bring it back to Earth to be retrieved by astronauts. It was another purple pigeon that never got off the ground, despite pleas from scientists.
For the first time in history, our children might be able to tell their children that they are the citizens of a nation which, for the first time, didn't simply and helplessly watch Halley fly by, but actually went out to meet it and to explore it.
In the end, it was the Soviet Union, Japan, and Europe that went forward with missions to meet the comet. What came to be known as Halley's Armada, a space fleet having no American presence, but one guided by two newly arrived scientists at JPL who were experts in tracking celestial bodies.
Our real role in the Comet Halley missions was, one, we had to predict where the comet was. That was my job. For the Soviets, for the Europeans, for the Japanese. And then we ran the International Halley Watch, which was a ground-based program to observe the comet in the infrared and the visible region to get astrometric data of where the comet was at any particular time.
Halley's Comet was kind of a training ground for myself for generating and writing software that could calculate some of the interesting questions that were being asked. In particular, questions like, how close is Halley's Comet going to the Earth?
In a face-saving gesture, NASA repurposed and gave a new name to a spacecraft near the end of its life and flew it past a comet. But there was no camera aboard, and it wasn't Halley's comet. Eventually, Halley receded from view, as did Bruce Murray. Frustrated by what he believed was a U.S. retreat from exploring the solar system, he stepped down as JPL's director 4 years before Halley's arrival.
Murray burned a lot of bridges with his campaigns for the Purple Pigeon and otherwise to save JPL. And at the time, well then it's now, NASA headquarters doesn't like it when centers kind of go off on their own to try to promote what they want to do and not what NASA headquarters has agreed with the White House should be done.
While none of Murray's Purple Pigeons took flight during his tenure, many of them would in years that followed. And looking back, perhaps what was more important for JPL than sending a spacecraft to Halley was the lab's pioneering work in predicting the path of the comet. For that accomplishment laid the foundation for JPL's future world leadership role in tracking near-Earth objects that could pose a threat to our planet and everything on it. Seven years after Halley's visit, 3 astronomers atop Palomar Mountain in California were searching the night sky for comets.
Could you please introduce yourself and tell me what you're doing?
Yes, I'm Carolyn Shoemaker with a stereo microscope that was built specially to look at our films.
Okay, Mr. Shoemaker, what are we doing and what's going on tonight?
Well, what I'm doing here is laying out our game plan for tonight. We'll probably take about 15 films tonight.
Their luck had not been good. For months, they had experienced bad weather and cloudy skies.
It was snowing. That was just about the lowest point of all of our years at Palomar. Third straight month with virtually no observing.
During what seemed sure to be another disappointing night, the clouds briefly parted, and they rushed to the telescope and captured a puzzling image. It was an object near Jupiter, but it looked nothing like a comet. Was it, they wondered, just a reflection of Jupiter? Or perhaps some galaxy seen edge-on? It turned out that the astronomers, Eugene and Carolyn Shoemaker and David Levy, had discovered a comet, and one like nothing ever seen before. Named after the 3 astronomers, Shoemaker-Levy 9 turned out to be a comet that 8 months before its discovery had broken into pieces due to Jupiter's gravitational influence.
And over the ensuing month, we learned that not only was this comet orbiting Jupiter, very unusual for a comet, but that it would impact Jupiter. And it wasn't just one impact, it was 21 impacts because the comet had broken up into the string of pearls. And so, real challenge, by the way, to calculate individual orbits for all those fragments. And I could confirm that with this software I had only recently developed. That was really the first real exercise of an impact calculation. It was for Jupiter.
This is a totally new event. The first time in the history of civilization, the history of the telescope, we are seeing an impact of a comet into a planet. Because of this, we are mounting the largest single campaign, the largest observing campaign for a single event in the history of astronomy. The good news is that it's going to do a spectacular demise in the atmosphere of Jupiter. The bad news is it's going to do it on the wrong side of Jupiter.
What Levy meant by the wrong side of Jupiter was that the fragments, which were estimated to range as much as a mile across, would be crashing into the backside of Jupiter as seen from Earth. And that meant that no telescope on Earth would be able to witness the actual impacts as they occurred. But on its way to Jupiter was JPL's Galileo spacecraft. By mere happenstance, Galileo would be in a position to witness the impacts live.
The Galileo spacecraft was en route to Jupiter, and it could look at the impact of the planet. Whereas from Earth, all the impacts occurred on the backside, and they rotated into view.
About an hour after each impact, the crash sites would be viewable from Earth, allowing ground telescopes to witness the aftermath. The excitement in the astronomy community about such an extraordinary event quickly began generating extra sensational press.
However, I was at the supermarket last Thursday, in the line, and I picked up a copy of The Sun. It's one of these tabloids that you slip underneath your six-pack of Coke on the way out. And anyway, it says, comet crash will start U.S. ice age. No government agency will verify the impending day of doom, but sources say that's only because they want to prevent wide-scale panic and rioting. This is a report by Mr. William Rock. I understand there's a few members of the press here today, and if Mr. William Rock is among them, I'd like a word with him after the talk, please.
But in the midst of Yeoman's witty remarks were actually some deadly serious implications.
The computer modelers are going nuts. There's a whole community of people within DoD who do nothing but model the effects of an impact, a nuclear detonation on Earth, or an asteroidal impact on Earth. The problem is they don't have any data. So what they would dearly love, of course, is a 100 million megaton impact on Earth to refine their computer calculations. There are some obvious problems with that. And so the same computer modelers are adjusting their code for Jupiter.
I have another question down here. We only had about just over a year warning of this event. It raised an interesting question. What do you suppose is the minimum warning time we would have for any comparable event on the Earth?
That's something we have been thinking about. An asteroid that's likely to strike Earth is one that we probably already know about, and so if the orbit is well enough determined, we can simply integrate forward with the appropriate perturbations on the computer. The exception to that, of course, are the comets, the long period comets that can indeed come out of the sun, take us by surprise. But these apparitions of long period comets are far less frequent than the asteroids. But if a comet did come out of the sun, it would take us. It would pretty much take us by surprise, and there's not a great deal we could do about it, but that's a very low probability event.
Just as Chodas and Yeomans predicted, the first fragment of Shoemaker Levy 9 slammed into Jupiter's southern hemisphere on July 16, 1994.
Scientists didn't know what to expect, because they were just little pinpoints with tails. And some were saying that these impacts would just kind of fizzle out, that we wouldn't even see anything. And then shortly after the predicted time for fragment A, we got a report that it was really it was a bright dot on the limb of Jupiter, so it was clearly visible, and we knew that fragment A was not one of the larger ones.
A massive fireball erupted, creating temperatures over 40,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The plume would rise nearly 2,000 miles above Jupiter's atmosphere. Over the next 6 days, at least 20 more fragments would slam into the giant planet.
As we went down the line, some of the bigger ones, when they impacted Jupiter, were releasing, by some accounts, millions of megatons of energy when they hit. Partly because they're coming in at high velocity, but also because these fragments were likely at least hundreds of meters in diameter each.
So in your mind's eye, sort of think of A as a 1 kilometer size object, maybe E is 1.5, and then G, I suspect we're getting up to about 3 kilometers. What we're seeing is not deep in the atmosphere. While the projectile punches down deeply,
all the hot stuff perps right back up to the surface. So these effects we're looking at are up on top of the normal atmosphere. They're above the ammonia cloud tops. All these wonderful features that we're seeing here is something that's been brought up from depth that's now deposited on top.
And one of these collisions with the G fragment, which was the largest one, generated an energy of something like 6 million megatons of TNT explosive, which is 600 times the global nuclear arsenal.
If you were going to ask what's the size crater this would make on the Earth, if we're right about our estimate of the size and the energy, if it hit a continent, it would make a 60-kilometer diameter crater, thereabouts. Material that's blown out of that crater would essentially blanket the Earth with a layer of fine debris that would just block sunlight. It would just get dark all over the Earth.
It was not hard to imagine the repercussions of such an event aimed at the Earth. But there was not much of a response by NASA or the Defense Department to tackling the problem. That began to change 4 years later, after a prediction that an asteroid might hit the Earth in 2028 became front-page news.
That was a false prediction. And the scientist who made that prediction at the Minor Planet Center was basing it on really of approximations. We, on the other hand, could actually calculate the impact probability, and it was 0. No chance that this asteroid would hit the Earth. And so this became front-page news in the New York Times and many other newspapers. Here we had one prediction that an asteroid could hit the Earth, and another group, Don and myself, saying, no, it can't hit. And so there was massive confusion, and I think this was a wake-up call for NASA.
By the time of this media frenzy, NASA was responding to a U.S. congressional directive to discover 90% of all near-Earth objects large enough and potentially close enough to cause global extinction of life on our planet. Today, it's estimated there are almost 1,000 of these large objects. About 90% of them have been located. But there are many more smaller but dangerous near-Earth objects. So far, nearly 5,000 of them have been detected and designated as FOEs, short for potentially hazardous objects. Most of the hunting for asteroids is done by ground-based telescopes, but determining their sizes and potential for causing damage is hampered by the dim light given off by these dark objects. But an infrared space telescope, originally called WISE, has been helping to fill this information gap.
This was a mission to survey the entire sky in 4 infrared wavelengths of light. So wavelengths longer than what our human eyes can see. And the objectives of the mission were pretty simple, to just make this incredible all-sky map with the goal of seeing everything in these different wavelengths. Well, it also turned out that this project was quite unexpectedly good at sensing asteroids. As it turns out, WISE was spectacularly effective at not just observing these objects, but actually discovering new ones.
After WISE's onboard coolant needed for stargazing was depleted, it was renamed NEOWISE and repurposed as an asteroid hunter. For an infrared telescope can do something light-seeking telescopes cannot do: determine the size of an object.
This is because we're measuring the heat that comes off of the body. So rather than sunlight bouncing off the surface, we're actually seeing sunlight that is absorbed by the asteroid and then re-radiated as heat. So you can imagine that if we can measure the distance to the asteroid, and we know its brightness in these infrared wavelengths, we can actually figure out how big it is, because that sort of falls out of the equations.
But the Space Telescope's second life is nearing an end. Now in development is a successor mission.
Now we're working on the Near-Earth Object Surveyor mission. This is a new NASA mission whose objective is really to go out and map out the entire population of near-Earth objects as completely as possible. In particular, we're focusing on objects that are large enough to cause what I would call severe regional damage, meaning they're 100 or 200 meters across, and that's equivalent to something that's about a 200 megaton nuclear explosion. That's pretty bad. From my standpoint, this is a fascinating problem for a few reasons. One, just fundamentally, it's a natural disaster that we can prevent through fairly straightforward means. We can literally go look up, and if we do a thorough enough job of it, we have a chance of actually predicting whether or not there is something that's headed our way. And even if the answer is no, coast looks clear, that's a really good answer. It means it's something we don't have to worry about. So that just nice, neat solvability from my perspective is a really wonderful and rare thing in science.
Comets usually aren't shy about making themselves known. But asteroids with their darker colorations are far harder to spot. Early visuals of them were made by ground-based antennas that use radar to create ghostly images like these. The first ever close-up visit to an asteroid occurred a year before the Shoemaker-Levy 9 collisions, when the Galileo spacecraft was able to take a slight detour to capture some bonus science. A NASA mission having as its sole purpose the exploration of asteroids was achieved by the Applied Physics Laboratory in Maryland. Their spacecraft, named Near Shoemaker, flew by one asteroid, then went into orbit around a second one called Eros. This was the first time a spacecraft had ever orbited an asteroid. After spending a year observing Eros, the team decided on a daring ending to the mission: to attempt soft landing on the asteroid, something never before done, and something the spacecraft was not designed to do. Pulling off such a feat required radar science measurements provided by JPL's Deep Space Network and the expertise of JPL navigators.
Right now, we've just completed doing the last set of navigation solutions. It's the last optical navigation update. And we provide that solution in case we want to adjust very slightly the time of the next set of maneuvers. And the group that has done the orbit determination for NEAR, both radiometric using the Doppler radio tracking, as well as the optical navigation using landmarks on the surface of Eros, are done here at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Okay, the cell data shows we're starting the maneuver.
Yeah, we're showing Doppler residuals are going down.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay.
We want this.
Yeah, we're 1.7 from the landing site, Dave.
Yeah, well, let's see now
that's slant range.
Get the maneuver started.
As navigators and as mission designers, this is the kind of challenge that we want. It's a very new, exciting, and challenging kind of mission to rendezvous with an asteroid and to attempt to touch it on the surface as lightly as we can. And I think we're certainly excited to find out what happens and how gently we can put it down.
Hit about 50 meters per second, or 50 meters low is what James says.
Those pictures are really spectacular. Yeah, you guys can celebrate now.
They're already popping the champagne corks. Hey, it looks like we hit less than 2 meters per second, and it did survive enough to track on the surface now.
We have two-way lock.
We have two-way lock.
After surviving the landing, the spacecraft continued operating for another 2 weeks, an impressive ending to an already successful mission. The first spacecraft to fly by an asteroid and a comet was a JPL mission whose purpose was not to chase down near-Earth objects, but to test a dozen advanced but risky technologies that larger, more expensive missions were hesitant to use. This was an effort to show that future projects could be smaller, less expensive, and capable of flying at times autonomously. At the top of the list of innovations was ion propulsion, a technology pioneered by NASA's Glenn Research Center that years before had been proposed for a mission to Halley's Comet.
Ion propulsion is designed to give fast and flexible access to the solar system for missions of the future. The first time I heard about it was from a Star Trek episode. It was an episode called Spock's Brain, for those of you who are Trekkies. And to me, one of the neat things about working on a project like this is we're really getting to turn this fantasy into reality, and that's very exciting.
Mark Raymond, a self-professed space nerd, decided as a young child that he wanted to be a rocket scientist. And now he was living his dream, having been handed the reins to Deep Space One, a spacecraft that really did sound like science fiction. Ion thrusters make use of atoms of xenon gas, which are given an electric jolt. That disturbance results in an electric charge, and the ions shoot out of the engine at tremendously high speeds, upwards to 90,000 miles per hour. But because all of this is occurring on atomic scales, the thrust is incredibly gentle and slow. Going from 0 to 60 miles an hour will take Deep Space One 4 days.
The thrust from our thruster is comparable to what I feel from the weight of this single piece of paper in my hand. That's how hard the ion propulsion system pushes on the spacecraft. But with time, the thrust builds up, and ultimately we can achieve very, very high velocities. It's what I like to call acceleration with patience. The spacecraft is also smart enough to know how hard the sun and planets are pulling on it, and it can actually determine where it's going. An analogy I like to give for how powerful the combination of autonomous navigation with ion propulsion is, compared to what we can do today, these two technologies are like having your car find its own way from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, arrive at a designated parking space, and do it all while getting 300 miles per gallon.
7, 6, green board.
Of course, Deep Space One first had to get off the ground.
Engine start and lift off.
That called for a rocket having a conventional propulsion system.
The Delta rocket with Deep Space One, testing the spacecraft technologies of the next century.
Within minutes of the launch, Deep Space One's high-risk billing seemed already in play.
When we launch a spacecraft, we calculate where it will be in the sky and what time it will turn on its radio transmitter.
Go ahead, Aiden. They're still running the receiver, attempting to acquire BSN screen at this time.
And the signal didn't show up. That's not where you want to run into problems on the mission.
Go ahead, Aiden. Go ahead. I just reported again, they still do not see a downlink signal. I copy that. Thank you very much. We're going to head and proceed with our contingency plans here. Stand by. Copy.
There were a lot more issues on that spacecraft than other spacecraft I've flown since.
Go ahead. I just reported again, they still do not see a downlink signal.
A lot of things go into that because we're kind of pushing the boundaries. We're building these things for the first time.
Also be advised that the station is currently experiencing some receiver problems and they do not see a signal. I copy. Thank you.
This moment of flight jitters eventually passes when the spacecraft reports that it is alive and well. The team spends the next 2 weeks preparing for turning on the spacecraft's ion propulsion system for the first time.
This was the big day when we were actually going to light it, go to warp power, emit that cool blue beam, and get underway with our powered flight.
At 18:59:00.
Ace, this is flight. You are go for radiation of India Charlie 018, X-ray 01 at 18:59.
This is the moment that is hoped will change the future of deep space exploration.
Right, once accelerated, shifts down some. Real high frequency stuff.
It'd be interesting to see the dock, see stuff in the dock.
Almost bet on. That's right. Seconds. This will change to true. It will go through the startup sequence.
Unit 1 team, this is Mission Director. Prepare for warp speed.
Yeah, right. I am.
So we had all these people here. We sent the commands to the spacecraft, and sure enough, right on schedule, the spacecraft went through its own final procedures to start the engine, started the engine. It worked great.
There it goes.
There it goes. All right.
Congratulations, Jack.
Everybody.
Congratulations.
Good job.
Not me. You guys.
Hey, Jay.
We lit off.
Current you're looking at is right there. 0.5.
JC.
There it is.
Everybody in mission control was all excited. People in the hallway were all excited.
Oh, we're in standby. We had 20 recycles.
We're seeing TDC mode.
Well, the spacecraft had thrust for 4.5 minutes and then stopped. And so we immediately started trying to diagnose the problem.
I think we need to focus on this. Roger that. Please consider your evaluation for restart.
People, excess people filter themselves out of the room. A lot of noise, a lot of crowding.
After regrouping, the team tries restarting the engine.
Thank you, Flight. This is Mission Director. You're authorized to radiate. Command DSN File Uniform Charlie 065 Alpha 01.
All units be advised, the thruster is off again.
Time limit. And we shut down and we're now in standby.
Roger that. Is there an evaluation of what caused the sequence of events?
There's discussion going on right now about that. We'll get back to you.
So every time it arcs, the high voltage cuts off and then goes back on automatically. Right, to try to clear the fault.
That's right. That's good for a
A number of attempts are made, all with the same result.
Shut down.
Did it happen right away this time, though?
Each time that happened, our spirits went down a little more. Ion propulsion was the primary objective, and here we were unable to get more than 4.5 minutes of thrust. And in fact, our minimum success criterion for Deep Space One was to thrust with the ion propulsion system for 200 hours. Well, we still had another 199 hours, 55 minutes, and 30 seconds to go.
While disappointing, these kinds of shutdowns didn't come as a total surprise. Similar events have occurred during lab tests.
Plasma wave is we're going to get the search close and see it's probably a noisy burn right there. Because it should clean up to be fairly clean once the accelerator works right.
There may have been just a small piece of contamination in the thruster, in the ion engine, left over perhaps from launch when the whole spacecraft was shaken violently.
Can we set up the times relative to what we're seeing?
Well, here's
We did a number of things, including turning the spacecraft so the engine would point toward the sun and away from the sun. That would loosen this particle so it could just drift away.
After 2 weeks of using the sun to alternatively heat up and cool down the spacecraft, the propulsion system was tried again. The era of ion propulsion had arrived.
Over the course of the mission, we put it through its paces, we tested it thoroughly, we showed we could count on it to propel the spacecraft, we could navigate with it. It was wonderful. That meant that many subsequent missions that would have been impossible without ion propulsion then were possible.
What followed was a whirlwind of testing the other technologies on board. And only 9 months after launch, with almost all of the mission's objectives met, the the team was eager to fly by an asteroid named Braille.
That was a great way to take all these new technologies and show that you could do planetary science. We're out there, let's go use all this fancy stuff to go take pictures of something.
The asteroid Braille was co-discovered just 6 years earlier. One of the two co-discoverers was Eleanor Glow Helen, a JPLer and a pioneer in asteroid hunting. That the asteroid was found was an impressive feat, for the asteroid was so dim that Deep Space One was almost unable to spot it. And just hours before the encounter, a software bug caused the spacecraft's computer system to overload, requiring a reboot.
The fact that the spacecraft was very temperamental, like, almost made us not able to do that encounter. We went into safe mode the morning we were supposed to do this flyby. I got a text message. Back then, you know, we didn't have cell phones. We just had these pagers, but the pagers were fancy ones that you could get a text message on. I got this text message that said, "We're in safe mode," and I'm like, wait, the encounter is tonight. It takes 3 days to recover from safe mode. Oh my gosh, I better get into work.
Racing against the clock, the team beamed up new instructions. The last command was transmitted with only minutes to spare. The science results were modest. The few images of the asteroid were taken at a further distance than intended, causing them to appear out of focus. Still, this had been the smallest celestial body ever targeted by a spacecraft, coming within 17 miles. An impressive accomplishment that convinced NASA that the mission was worthy of a second shot. The next target would be a comet. But in November 1999 came the most serious crisis of the entire mission. The spacecraft's star tracker, which looks at stars to determine the spacecraft's orientation, ceased working. Without it, the spacecraft was left in a state of confusion, knowing neither up from down nor right from left.
The star tracker on Deep Space One is responsible for telling the spacecraft how it's oriented in the zero gravity of space. We know where it is and where it's going, but we can't tell where it's pointed without the star tracker.
The spacecraft, for all intents and purposes, could accomplish nothing of value without the star tracker. There was no reasonable, rational prospect of being able to continue the mission. But I didn't want to give up that easily.
Normalize all these to one number and decide what to add or subtract.
The team started working on ways that we could rescue this spacecraft from across the solar system. With a fatal, catastrophic failure for which there was not even a concept for how we might recover. All we had to work with was what was on board the spacecraft, plus, of course, ones and zeros that we could send to it.
VSS 45? VSS 45.
There followed months of very, very long hours, every day, constant stress, this feeling of, you know, I want to get this spacecraft working again.
There ended up being only one possible fix: to send up new software that would reconfigure the spacecraft's camera to do double duty as a star tracker and a camera.
The science camera was not designed to do that and had a much narrower field of view. The star tracker has a giant wide field of view that can see a significant part of the sky. The science camera is sort of like trying to drive your car looking through a soda straw. Basically, what we needed to do from then on was pick a direction that we wanted to thrust, find a star near there, and then thrust at that star for a while. And then after a while, the navigators would tell us, now we need you to point the thrust in this other direction. Like, oh, okay, let's go find a star over there that we can thrust at.
Like a sailboat tacking with the wind, Deep Space One zigzagged its way to a comet named Borrelli. The closest approach would be on September 22, 2001. 11 days before then was 9/11, the day the United States was attacked by 4 hijacked planes.
It just turned the world upside down. Personal emotions about it was, by gosh, we are going to accomplish this thing. We aren't going to let this stop us. The lab is completely empty. There's guards everywhere with guns, there's guards with shotguns at the front gate. And, we have special permission to be the only people allowed on lab because we have this operations work to do. It was very emotional. Said a lot of people had their American flags. I'm a volunteer for the JPL search and rescue team. I had some inkling of what was going on in New York. So I wore my search and rescue helmet that day.
We had faced so many difficulties. We'd had to make so many decisions. And, Deep Space One had not been designed or built to encounter a comet. And the encounter at Borrelli didn't go the way we expected. Instead, it was perfect. Years of nursing along this damaged, wounded spacecraft, it was pretty rewarding.
Scientists were elated with what were then the highest resolution pictures ever taken of a comet. The stubborn team of engineers could also take pride in having opened up a new chapter in robotic space exploration. Three months later, with the spacecraft running low on fuel and no other science destination within reach, the mission was officially declared over. Today, Deep Space One, a small spacecraft operated by a small team with big hearts, silently circles the sun.
Perfect, okay.
It's nice up here.
Correct. Copy. You're clear to go.
Okay. Here we go.
During the same year that Deep Space One flew by asteroid Braille, NASA's first mission devoted exclusively to comet exploration was underway. The vehicle wasn't a balloon, although this one was part of a critical pre-launch test. The main goal of this mission, called Stardust, is to send a spacecraft out to capture samples from a comet and then bring them back to Earth. What's been pushed out of the balloon is a model of the capsule that is to contain the comet particles. This drop test is to determine how hard a landing the capsule can withstand. The landing area is the Dugway Proving Grounds, a remote military facility in northwestern Utah, The winter weather makes for a cold outing, but the wet ground will hopefully make for a soft landing.
It wasn't traversing. We landed right on the road.
Oh, right.
A comet sample return mission was first proposed for Comet Halley. The scientist involved in that original proposal, Don Brownlee, had never let go of the idea. And the comet that's been chosen to sample, Wilt 2, has an unusual history, as comets go.
We have this wonderful situation. The comet came from the edge of the solar system, came into the inner part of the solar system where we are, and then we sent a spacecraft out halfway to Jupiter to meet this thing. So it's really kind of a sort of a magical situation, I think.
Wilt 2 is believed to be as old as our solar system, and it is thought to contain some of the most pristine and pure materials out of which the solar system is formed. That made for a convincing case to greenlight the mission. And the price tag didn't hurt its selection chances either. This was one of NASA's early faster, better, cheaper missions. The goal was to fly a spacecraft for less money and on a faster schedule. And Stardust promised just that. The spacecraft is a straightforward design having few bells and whistles. It is to be powered by solar panels, but no spacecraft has ever been asked to travel as far from the sun using solar energy as this mission will have to go. No spacecraft had ever flown as close to a comet as was planned for Stardust, which is why the spacecraft is front-loaded with bulletproof shielding.
We're playing a game here. We want to go close as possible to the comet to get the best images and to collect the most amount of sample, but we don't want to get hit by large enough particles to destroy the spacecraft.
Stardust's most unusual feature is its comet dust collector. It resembles a tennis racket full of ice cubes. But this blue material is an ultralight compound called aerogel. Sometimes referred to as frozen smoke, it's a solid that is 99% air. JPL researcher Peter Sue made a career out of finding ways to use this strange material.
Aerogel, although it's very fragile, but it has very high compressive strength. And let me demonstrate to you, this piece of aerogel weighs about 10 grams. This piece of plexiglass is about 50 grams. That's already 5 times the weight. This is 1,000 grams. This is another 1,000 grams, it's 2 kilograms. So this is 2,000 times its own weight.
While aerogel can carry more than its own weight, it's also porous enough to capture intact comet particles that are moving faster than a bullet. A year after its launch in 1999, Stardust gathered in the first 2 samples of interstellar dust. Then it was on to a full dress rehearsal of a comet encounter by flying by asteroid Anne Frank. To protect the spacecraft, Stardust was kept at a safe distance of over 2,000 miles. Still, engineers were delighted with the test. And scientists even got a far-off peek at the asteroid. Another year passes before the encounter with Wilt 2. And as the day nears, the comet isn't cooperating. It's dimmer than expected. And that likely means there will be far fewer dust particles to collect than wanted.
As far as the
brightness of the object, the photometry is concerned, we're somewhere between 5/7 and 5/10 the amount of dust that we expected to observe. Yeah, there's less light coming from the thing this time, less flux.
The only way to collect more dust is to fly closer to the comet. But flying closer increases the risk that the mission could be lost.
Now, originally, these observations we weren't going to use to change our plans. We were just going to use to confirm that we're still in the ballpark.
This meeting offers a rare look into how such pressure decisions are made in real time. The encounter is only 3 days away. At the table are JPL engineers, navigators, scientists, a NASA headquarters representative, and by phone, the spacecraft contractor Lockheed Martin. Given the concern that debris shedding off the comet might ruin the encounter or even destroy the spacecraft, the question on the table is how close should the flyby be?
I didn't make too much noise about going to 300 at the time because there is a chance that we might lose all of the images if we go into 150.
If we do go into 150, pretty much we're close to collecting the particles, but if we go into that close, there's about a 4 times higher chance we will lose the image sequence during the flyby. So what's science assessment?
Well, my recommendation is we target for 250, which is a modest correction. This is better than sticking at our target value of 300 kilometers we did in the past. I'll use Sham's golf analogy. We're approaching the hole, and we're doing tweaks as we're coming in.
And there's still a probability it'll work. I mean, it's not saying that it won't work. It's just
What do you mean?
Yeah, but
What do you mean probability?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's an absolute failure. I'm not saying it's an absolute success.
You know, if we're opening up, we're exposing ourselves to some new risk we haven't imagined, then that's really a stupid thing we'll always be crucified for. And if we lose imaging close in, we take a gamble. We've always known that the comet could disintegrate any minute. It could turn off, it could turn on. It's an uncontrolled beast.
Okay, I think another data point is independent of science. I will not support a 150 kilometer flyby. I will be dead set against it.
So your recommendation is 250.
250.
After all this back and forth, the team is in accord. The trajectory will be changed to bring Stardust 50 kilometers closer to the comet. If Vilt 2 has any more last-minute surprises, there are preloaded contingency plans aboard Stardust that hopefully will allow the spacecraft to respond on its own.
Hey, Tom, you're really fading out. You've been breaking up now.
Yeah, we got a lot of static here.
Good morning. This is Stardust Mission Control at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California.
It is now 1 day after New Year's Day 2004. The time for the comet flyby has arrived.
After nearly 5 years and 2 billion miles of space travel, Stardust is about to perform a flyby of comet Vilt 2.
It is also just 1 day before the landing of JPL's Opportunity rover on Mars. A busier time would be hard to imagine.
We are going into an unknown environment. No spacecraft has ever gone this close to a comet.
Is that consistent with the 4-degree roll, which we expect to see?
The moment of closest approach passes. Stardust is still sending back a signal. It has survived the encounter.
Life is tremendously good. We've flown through the worst of it, and we're still in contact with our spacecraft.
Soon the spacecraft will be transmitting back news that it has captured thousands of particles, and to the delight of everyone, images of the comet.
You've seen these pictures? That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Nothing else in the universe looks like this, you know?
That's right.
Thank you.
Nothing. Looks a lot different than Halley. It looks a lot different than Borelli.
We were expecting some kind of rubble pile looking thing, just a dark black object, broken charcoal briquettes or something. It was kind of a smooth, boring thing. We were completely wrong.
Wilt 2 was a far stranger object than imagined. The comet's surface was dotted with towering pinnacles, steep cliffs, and oddly shaped craters.
It was absolutely astounding. The first picture we got back showed these tremendous features, which are now called left foot and right foot, which looked like someone in a big clown suit just put their left foot and right foot into the surface of the comet. Now, these are kilometer-sized features that are hundreds of meters deep.
The flyby, though, had been far more dangerous than expected. Dozens of jets had bombarded the spacecraft at a rate of 1 million particles per second. Like a geyser erupting, jets are outbursts of material from a comet caused by heating by the sun.
We fly these missions and we do the best job possible to model everything we think will happen. The closer you get, the more dust you get. Maybe there's a few big jets that are waiting for us, gunning for us. And our prediction was no. And we were proved wrong, quite wrong, but we did survive.
With its bounty of comet and interstellar particles safely on board, Stardust, sand-blasted but still sturdy, began its 2-year journey back home. Once near the Earth, Stardust is to release its capsule, which will have to endure the intense heat of re-entry through the atmosphere. Next, a parachute is to deploy, which should provide the capsule with a soft landing in Utah. Helicopters are to retrieve the capsule. Then this cosmic cargo is to make its way to a lab at the Johnson Space Center in Houston for detailed examination. That's the plan. But a parachute had failed to open on another JPL mission called Genesis. Its capsule, containing samples of the solar wind, slammed into the Utah desert. Fortunately, enough particles survived the hard landing to be useful for scientists. But no one wants to see a repeat of such a shattering experience. After a journey of 7 years and nearly 3 billion miles, the capsule re-entered the atmosphere at a speed of nearly 29,000 miles per hour, the fastest re-entry of any human-made object on record. Witnessing the spectacular entry, the scientists flying aboard a NASA Ames research plane. The blazing capsule filled with comet particles now looked to be itself a comet.
We have confirmation of the main chute.
All station, chute is open.
Stardust was the first sample return mission since Apollo astronauts brought rocks from the moon back to Earth. Inside the capsule were thousands of samples of comet and stardust that were shared with scientists worldwide. These particles, the only known samples from the outer solar system, were once part of a primitive, ice-rich body that formed well beyond Pluto. But surprisingly, many of the rock dust particles were similar to those found in primitive meteorites that formed close to the sun. Apparently, these particles samples were transported to the distant comet-forming area in the outer regions of our solar system. Their discovery was the presence of the amino acid glycine, a fundamental building block of life. Its detection has added credence to the idea that the materials necessary for life to rise may be spread in abundance across the universe. While Stardust brought back samples from a comet's surface, JPL's deep impact mission was designed to hit a comet in hopes of revealing what materials reside in its interior.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition and liftoff of a Delta II rocket carrying deep impact, NASA's journey to unlock the mystery of the solar system's origin.
And the air starts have ignited.
Being launched into space are actually two spacecraft, the Deep Impact Mothership and its cargo, a small washing machine-sized impactor to be released to collide with a comet. The two spacecraft were built by Ball Aerospace, with JPL responsible for management oversight and creating the especially complex software required for the mission.
We had 12 months to complete the assembly of the prime spacecraft, complete the assembly of the impactor spacecraft, go through the entire environmental test program, fix the flight software, fix the fall protection, fix all the bugs that we found along the way, and figure out in parallel how to hit the comet.
Hitting a comet was something no spacecraft had ever done. And to have any chance required creating computer simulations at JPL. As often as not, the early simulations resulted in misses. And then, 2 months before launch, a near catastrophic mistake was made.
There was that black day in November where somebody came in and accidentally deleted all the files. Sequences that we were working on for post-launch, encounter, everything, gone on one night. Deleted because somebody thought they needed space on a server. And it was like, how in the hell do we ever recover from this?
The solution was to work intensely long hours, and the pressure didn't let up post-launch. The journey to the comet, named Temple 1, was a short one, just 6 months. When only halfway there, the comet was already in sight. The JPL flight team barely had enough time to settle in before the encounter was upon them.
Normally it takes many months to launch a spacecraft and check it all out in flight and learn its idiosyncrasies and get it all calibrated and working good. And so to launch the spacecraft only 6 months from then have an encounter was very challenging. We were sleeping in our offices level of working on it. And I came in one day, to my office, and I had my bedding all set up, and somebody had turned down my sleeping bag and put a mint on my pillow and left a little note that said, "Complimentary turn-down service." And it was crazy, crazy days.
And what Deep Impact was expected to do sounded a little crazy too. What's been described as hitting a bullet with a bullet. After the impactor is released, its onboard navigation system has to visually find the comet in order to execute 3 targeting maneuvers. 3 chances of zeroing in on the comet.
The impactor, once we release it, has an auto-nav system like we introduced with Deep Space One, and it locks onto the comet and tries to make sure that it's going to hit it. And it makes that first correction based on information from a long ways away. And so each successive correction as we get closer is going to be better and smarter. And so there wasn't a lot of actual commanding going on. It was mostly we're watching the spacecraft to make sure nothing funny happens.
All of this is to occur on the 4th of July. The comet Tempel 1, not to be outdone, has already been shooting off its own celestial fireworks. Comets are known to sometimes have sudden outbursts, releasing massive amounts of gas, ice, and dust that briefly increase their brightness. The concern is that if Tempel 1 decides to flare up during the encounter, the impactor's auto-navigation system could become confused. Worst case, the impactor might miss the comet entirely. It's not what the team wants to happen on a national holiday. It's now the 4th of July. The time of impact is 90 minutes away. The first impactor trajectory maneuver, or ITM, is underway.
Impact flight, pressure drop. Flight drop. TCM thrust firing. Dawn times increasing. Copy, thank you. Flight confirmed. Good radio. Roger, my 3, 2, 1. Mark. Cast attempts. As expected, the accumulated on time is about right as well. More full report later. Copy, thank you.
The comet is not yet done with its surprises.
What's the most difficult issue that's confronting the team?
Right now it's the comet, which is why we're going. It's in a very strange shape to it. We've been watching it all day as we get closer. We initially thought this thing was something like a nipple. When we get closer, it looks like a banana. And the latest resolution that we have in the rotation of this going is that we're looking at the end of it, and the end of it is basically triangular. So it all depends on what that comet does, what type of face it presents to us, and we have to solve for that.
And it appears that this has been quite a temperamental comet. Over the last couple of days, we've seen several outbursts from it.
Yes, that's true. We have seen the actual jet outbursts that brighten it, and so it's very exciting for the scientists.
And nerve-wracking for the engineers. And even worse, the results of the first impactor maneuver were not what was expected.
It was the biggest movement off the comet we have seen, period. Even more than any of the simulations.
And that knowledge raises the possibility that deep impact might miss the comet entirely.
And the chatter is starting up that everybody's really worried on whether we can correct for that and come back in again.
My left leg, my out it. Go ahead. 555, decline, 365, 5341.0. The time of flight correct. Less than 1 second at this point. Left flight, fly out now. Go ahead. I say we're about a kilometer off the ground.
So I was basically moving when issues would come up. Turned out that first correction kind of took us off in the weeds a little bit. They're aware of it and worried about it, but they're also like, it's supposed to bring us back. It was hair-raising.
looks like a ghost. Like it's out of pieces here. And it goes off net and comes back 5 minutes later. It looks better. Got these over. He was so sick. How big the right hand was, and he wasn't sure. We can't do anything about it.
All three cameras. Impacting cameras.
Unaware of the concerns over trajectory awareness, but he has his own reasons for his actions.
Stooge, if you're out there talking, either it was a sufficient success or tremendous failure.
So I was just worried sick that this question after the fact that NASA has spent $240 million on this. You guys missed.
Best image to date that what's right is actually a pretty jet black object that is being overexposed to show the light. It's sort of rotating along an axis more or less up and down.
Thruster burns is over. Nothing more can be done.
Reporting on our last neighborhood change of flyby, final image. We have a disable of all 87. Basically, we're left with hardware talking. Yes, you're on your own.
Coming down from the spacecraft. No longer pickle or the eggplant.
Yeah, now we're moving from pickle to the eggplant here, and it looks like we have some clearer surface features over there on the right. A dark depression, perhaps?
Jets. Look at all the jets. Yes.
I have a little voice in my ear that tells me that we can put up the impact camera image on our monitor right now. And
Okay. This is the impactor image, the spot where we're headed for impact. The spacecraft's doing remarkably well for something that's about to vaporize. It's getting closer. We may be getting some serious dust hits. Our brave little spacecraft is in a very hostile environment here. We're going not only faster than a speeding bullet, we're going about 10 times faster than a speeding bullet. And that puts Superman to shame. We're expecting to lose the spacecraft any minute here. But it's doing one heck of a job just before checking out.
Flight, this is Telecon. We have lost the block. Copy that.
The mothership flying underneath the comet recorded the aftermath. The impact was far more dramatic than expected, generating a brilliant flash of light, an immense fluffy cloud of ice, dust, and gas. That the comet's surface was so extremely fine, weaker than powdered snow, was a major surprise. This was no ice cube comet.
A crater and ejecta that's just enormous. It's considerably brighter and considerably more material coming off than I thought.
Also unexpected was the sizable amount of organic material that was detected. Yet another indication that comets and asteroids may have seeded the early Earth with the building blocks of life.
We've got all the data we could possibly ask for, and the science team is ecstatic. And not a one of them can believe they're being paid to have this much fun.
Two, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight.
There was more fun the very next day. The Comets, the original backup band for Bill Haley and the Comets, were on a nostalgic tour and made a surprise visit to JPL to offer their musical congratulations. Word of their presence quickly spread, and soon a spontaneous celebration erupted. These comets were rocking before there was even such a thing as a space age. And they still knew how to make an impressive impact of their own. Years before, after Voyager's final planetary encounter, the legendary Chuck Berry had played on this same spot. Now JPLers could also boast of having rocked away to the sounds of rock and roll's very first band.
We love you all.
Deep Impact's impactor was no more. But the mothership had survived, and the team was eager to sign up for another mission. 5 years after the Temple 1 encounter, Deep Impact flew by a second comet, Hartley 2. JPL's Stardust mission was also repurposed. It revisited Temple 1 to see the aftermath of Deep Impact's collision with the comet. And Deep Impact was followed up by NASA's Goddard DART mission. The spacecraft flew into a tiny moon orbiting an asteroid to demonstrate how they might be moved slightly off course. Keeping track of asteroids and comets is an international effort. A Chinese lunar orbiter flew out and passed by an asteroid. The European Space Agency's Rosetta mission, with a JPL science instrument on board, accomplished the first mission to deploy a lander to a comet's surface. And NASA's New Horizons mission holds bragging rights to the most distant object ever explored, following its flyby of Pluto. After JPL's innovative sample return missions, Japan's space agency has gone a step further. Their Hayabusa 1 mission landed on an asteroid, collected tiny grains of material, and brought them back to Earth. The Japanese repeated this remarkable achievement a second time, a decade later. NASA's OSIRIS-REx mission has also collected samples from an asteroid, which are now on their way home, scheduled to arrive in 2023. The technology advances from JPL's Deep Space One mission were put to use on the laboratory's Dawn mission. Using ion propulsion, Dawn was able to orbit two worlds in our solar system for the very first time, Vesta and Sirius, the largest objects in the asteroid belt. Recently launched is NASA's Lucy mission, that is to visit asteroids that share the orbit of Jupiter. And Psyche, a spacecraft managed by JPL, will soon be on its way to an asteroid made not of rock or ice, but metal. Flying a spacecraft propelled by a solar sail finally succeeded in 2019 with the Planetary Society's tiny LightSail 2 spacecraft. This publicly funded mission stayed in Earth orbit for 3 years before re-entering the atmosphere. A more recent NASA solar sail mission failed to deploy. All of these missions are about learning more about asteroids and comets, so that we might better defend against them. One element of planetary defense is called mitigation. What might be done should a near-Earth object threaten our planet.
There are lots of mitigation ideas. Putting a solar sail on the asteroid, throwing rocks off the surface. There's gravity tractors. Just using the gravitational attraction between the asteroid and the spacecraft and thrusting in the spacecraft, you could move the asteroid off its Earth impact course if you had enough time. There's the impactor, which would be my favorite because it's so simple. And the DART mission and the Deep Impact mission demonstrated the fact that we can run into these targets if need be. In a worst-case scenario, if you had a large object and with little time, you could use a nuclear explosion. Much like the Armageddon movie in '88. We'd have to bring back Bruce Willis. But the three most important things for mitigating a potential Earth impact are to find them early, and find them early before they find us.
And a recent example of that need occurred in 2013. It was a year when it was known that an asteroid named 2012 DA14 would be passing extremely close to Earth.
A very close approach, and it was going to come within the ring of geosynchronous satellites. So that's really close. It's almost scary close in the sense that you want to see whether it's going to hit any satellites. But we knew that it would not hit. And we have been tracking this for about a year and predicting this close approach. So it was an event. And we had a NASA TV show hosted here at JPL in which we were planning to talk all about the close approach. It's nothing to worry about, and it's come really close, and these things are rare, but we know that it's not going to hit.
Now, DA14 is not a threat. It will not hit the Earth. Scientists say the closest it will get...
Well, the night before that, what should happen, but on YouTube, all these reports of a massive fireball in Russia, in the city of Chelyabinsk. A lot of the videos were from dash cams. And they showed a really massive fireball coming in that was clearly much brighter than the sun. So that's a major event. It became evident that our little story of an asteroid coming really close to the satellites was being totally preempted.
Well, right now I am joined by Paul Chodas. And Paul, we probably have to address right off the top this meteor that hit Russia overnight.
What an exciting day. We feel it's like in a shooting gallery here. We have two rare events of near-Earth objects approaching the Earth on the same day.
What can you tell us about this? anything at this point?
First of all, the two events are unrelated. The meteor over Siberia and over Russia was not related to the asteroid 2012 DA, and they're not in the same trajectory, the same orbit. It's simply a coincidence that they happen to hit and come near the Earth at the same day.
How big was this meteor?
The meteor, we think, was around 15 meters in size, which is about 1/3 the size of DA-14 itself.
Okay, so it's much smaller.
Much smaller, and you can see what sort of destruction and shock wave that a smaller asteroid can produce. It's like Mother Nature is showing us what a small one, a tiny one, really can do.
The energy released is estimated to have been equal to a TNT blast of 500 kilotons. Many times larger than that of the atomic bombs used in World War II. The shock wave blew out windows, damaged buildings, and caused upwards to 1,500 injuries, including reports of skin burns and temporary blindness. A question raised was, why wasn't this asteroid detected? The answer was that it had approached the Earth from the direction of the Sun. Looking towards the Sun is a blind spot, not only for our eyes, but for telescopes too. To have had an advanced warning of the Chelyabinsk meteor would have required spotting it in a darker part of the sky. The last time an event like Chelyabinsk occurred was more than a century ago. But the fact that such a small object, believed to have been no larger than 50 feet in size, can cause such damage is yet another warning issued by Mother Nature. For there are likely millions more near-Earth objects of this same size yet to be found. So how should the world prepare for the possibility of a major impact by a near-Earth object? In the United States, various government agencies annually take part in tabletop exercises in which they must react to a fictional near-Earth object impact. The realistic schemes are devised by JPL's Center for Near-Earth Object Studies. The mastermind for creating these fictional threats of doom is the center's mild-mannered Paul Chodas.
The conference is called Planetary Defense Conference. They have been going for 15 years now, more, almost 20 years. At each of these, we have typically have exercises where we kind of ask ourselves, what would happen if? And at many of these, I put together scenarios of an impacting asteroid heading for the Earth, and simulating that and calculating what we would know when.
One exercise, played out in 2021, began with a new asteroid of an undetermined size being discovered by a ground-based telescope. It is some 35 million miles away, about a third of the average distance to the Sun. The discovery is relayed to the Minor Planet Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which collects and catalogs small solar system objects. News of the asteroid is then passed on to JPL.
We pick that data up. We do that routinely. All of this is automated, so we would compute its orbit as accurately as possible, and the uncertainties in that orbit, which initially would be huge, and determine whether or not there's a chance of impact. This particular scenario, that impact is only 6 months away, and so our software is able to detect the fact that this could hit the Earth. We need more observations.
A mere 6-month lead time is dire news, but initial calculations show that the probability of an impact is low, about 1 chance in 2,500. But to have any confidence in this estimate, more observations are needed.
So depending on where the true impact trajectory is.
For a week, astronomers across the world aimed their telescopes at the night sky. And with each observation, the odds of an impact increased.
Continuing to track it gives us better and better idea of whether or not it might impact. But there's the other matter of knowing, well, what are the effects of that impact? And that depends on the mass of the asteroid, which is basically its size. But we never really know its size accurately unless we have something like radar on it, or we visit it with a spacecraft and take images of it.
These two options aren't feasible. Radar is only effective when an asteroid is near the Earth. By then it will be too late. And with the impact just 6 months away, there's not enough time to launch a spacecraft to make up-close observations. So virtually nothing will be known about the asteroid's size and the damage it might cause.
The risk corridor. Let me move ahead to through a lot of this stuff to.
By the end of the first week, the probability of the asteroid hitting the Earth has climbed to 5%, or 1 chance in 20. As to where the impact may occur, the potential areas are at first literally all over the map, covering 2/3 of the Earth's surface.
Large swaths of the Earth are at risk initially, and it's our job to get a better and better orbit to narrow that down so that we know where the asteroid is headed and we can isolate the region of the Earth where it might hit.
To make matters worse, for the next few days, new observations by ground telescopes aren't possible due to the glare of a full moon. Astronomers use this time to search through their archives, looking for any possible past signs of the asteroid buried in their records. Meanwhile, for policymakers, a major question is what information should be shared with the public and when.
The data on which we base our orbit calculations are really international in scope, and they're available to all around the world. And the other orbit computers can run their calculations, maybe not quite as elaborate as ours, but come up with similar results. So it would be very difficult to kind of sit on this impact prediction and not tell anyone.
The group's suggested headline doesn't mince words. Newly discovered asteroid poses risk of Earth impact in 6 months.
These are just nominals.
Another week goes by. The effort to comb through past data has paid off. It shows that the asteroid had passed by unnoticed 7 years before. With this orbit data in hand, a better prediction of the asteroid's flight path can be constructed. The news is not good. The impact probability is now 100%. The potential target areas are narrowing too. A new headline is prepared. New observations confirm asteroid will impact in 6 months. The regions at risk are Europe and North Africa.
In this particular scenario, with only a few months of warning, it's really impractical to think that we could deflect this particular object. So then this scenario was designed more or less to deal with the civil defense issues of what you would do to evacuate areas once you knew more or less where it's hitting and once you knew more or less its size.
If the asteroid is as large as 160 feet, the impact is expected to be as powerful as the atomic bombs used in World War II. If it is 1,000 feet in diameter, destruction would be measured on a continental scale. A half-mile wide asteroid could mean global catastrophe. Meanwhile, an international effort has been exploring how a space mission might protect the Earth.
We did talk about, what we could do to mitigate and whether there would be any possibility. But with 6 months, there's not much.
It's soon apparent there's not enough time to attempt a deflection technique that might knock the asteroid off course. The only option left is to try to launch a spacecraft armed with a nuclear explosive device.
We have engine ignition.
And because so little is known about the asteroid, the recommendation is to send as large a bomb as possible, and then hope for the best. Of course, this assumes that a spacecraft capable of being quickly armed with a nuclear device is possible. Currently, no such rapid response capability is known to exist. Meanwhile, observations by the infrared space telescope NEOWISE provide the first information about the asteroid's size. It is likely no more than 500 feet in diameter, and the impact zone has narrowed down to a region mostly within Germany, Czechia, and Austria. Among the cities at risk are Munich, Prague, and Vienna. It is now 6 days until impact. The asteroid is 4 million miles away and now in range of JPL's radar imaging assets. The size of the asteroid is further refined. It is somewhere between 300 and 400 feet in diameter. Estimates of how powerful the impact could be range from 9 to over 150 megatons. To give those numbers meaning, a single megaton contains the energy equivalent of 1 million tons of TNT. The day of impact arrives. The asteroid enters the atmosphere at the precise time predicted. The world can only await what will follow. Today, we know of more than 1 million asteroids in our solar system, and thousands are found every year. Most reside in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and they pose no threat from that location. Of concern are asteroids that are nearer, especially those that can cross Earth's orbit. It's believed that 90% of the near-Earth objects that could cause a global catastrophe have been found. But there are estimated to be thousands of asteroids large enough to cause severe damage over a wide region that have yet to be discovered. But that knowledge doesn't seem to keep asteroid hunters awake at night.
These events are so very unlikely to happen that it's not something that we lose sleep over. In fact, I feel more confident in the sense that we have capability to deal with them.
Out of the tabletop exercise, there was one big takeaway: greater awareness of the extreme challenges that come with a late discovery.
The bottom line of that exercise is that that asteroid could have been found earlier, at least 7 years earlier, with a better asteroid survey, a more sensitive survey, such as NEO-Surveyor.
Had a more robust detection system been in place that included a space infrared telescope, this fictional asteroid might have been known years earlier, allowing for a number of mitigation options. There could have been time to build and launch a reconnaissance spacecraft to determine the asteroid's composition, mass, and size. With that knowledge, a plan of action to divert the asteroid could have been devised. So what is the best line of defense? The answer is worth repeating.
The primary goal for defending against near-Earth objects around Earth impacting trajectory is to find them early, and find them early before they find us.
Pictures of the sky above the Utah Test and Training Range. In less than an hour, a $1.5 billion piece of the ancient solar system will be landing here in the desert. This is live coverage of NASA's OSIRIS-REx sample return.
There's been nothing like OSIRIS-REx in NASA's repertoire. I like to call it the Daredevil spacecraft.
10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of OSIRIS-REx to boldly go to the asteroid Annunaki and back.
Welcome and thank you for joining us live from the Army's Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. This is special because America's first asteroid sample return mission, OSIRIS-REx, as it arrives back to Earth after more than 7 years of traveling in deep space. I'm Lauren Ward, and joining me is Dr. Jim Garvin, Chief Scientist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. He's a planetary geologist by training and also probably one of the most excited people around here today.
Lauren, literally, I'm over the edge.
Better than over the moon. Well, I'm excited to share the stage with you today. We've got a lot to discuss and a huge adventure straight ahead. And for those joining at home, Jim and I will be taking your questions live throughout the show. You can send those our way by using the hashtag AskX. And if you want to follow along this final mission, NASA's Eyes on the Solar System, where you can view a complete 3D simulation and follow the OSIRIS-REx sample return capsule to the ground. And during the broadcast, you'll hear directly from the mission team, so listen very closely for those operational callouts. Before we get into the action, though, tell me, Jim, what are you most excited about?
Lauren, it's the masterpiece of engineering we have here. Just think about it. It's technology we've gone from bringing things on the moon back on cruise to samples of science that's so we can't wait to see it.
We cannot wait. So OSIRIS-REx is an acronym for Origins, Spectral Interpretation, and Identification of Security Regolith Explorer. Yes, it's a mouthful, but the mission describes an audacious objective. Send a probe on a long journey to an asteroid, map it, grab a sample, then bring it back to Earth for analysis. Following launch on September 8, 2016, the plucky probe took an extraordinary route through the solar system until it reached the asteroid Bennu. Then, after more than a year of mapping the surface in exquisite detail, OSIRIS-REx made a careful descent in October 2020 to collect a sample. 3 years later, we are here at Dugway Proving Ground, awaiting that capsule containing the sample, which experts tell us is essentially a time capsule of the ancient solar system. We've got a great team joining us this morning as we experience this thrilling conclusion of this grand adventure. Sophia Roberts is located near our landing zone, and she'll be speaking with some key players. We'll also hear from James Traley, who will be tracking mission operations and bringing us real-time updates, essentially our eyes and ears inside mission control. which sounds to me like a good place to jump into the story. James, good morning. How are we looking?
Yeah, good morning, Lauren and Jim. It's already been a very bright early morning for all of our team members involved in this mission. Just a little bit further north from us, about 4 hours ago in Waterton, Colorado, the team met to assess the readiness to release the SRC main OSIRIS-REx spacecraft. I'm very happy to report that they gave the green light, they gave the go command officially to release the SRC from the OSIRIS-REx. Let's listen in on what the command sounded like. That command came after more than almost 4 billion miles of spaceflight and years of planning, plotting, and dreaming about this asteroid Bennu. The SRC has now been separated from the main OSIRIS-REx spacecraft and is coming in rain or shine today. So team members are keenly aware of the weather conditions out on the range. It's looking pretty great for today. We did have a bit of rain the other day, which softened up that landing spot just enough to make the SRC land perfectly smooth on that surface. The temperatures are going to be around the 50s, 50 degree Fahrenheit. Low winds out there, calm winds at the surface around 6 miles an hour. Pretty light. Very clear skies this morning as well. As we were actually walking out, I saw a shooting star and meteor just a few minutes from the SRC itself. The skies to track it. Just a few moments ago, we heard the helicopters take off from here, just at the edge of the landing ellipse. Our high-altitude plane is up in the sky, ready to take images in the infrared of our SRC, and we are here, ready to go to cover all of today's mission events. I'm going to be right here with you all throughout the process as we get closer to that entry, descent, and landing. But for now, back to you, Lauren and Jim.
All right, thanks, James. We'll be back to you for mission status updates throughout the morning. For now, let's give you a quick geography lesson on where we are today. We are sitting about 85 miles southwest of Salt Lake City in the heart of the Dugway Proving Ground, a historic Army facility. In less than an hour, the sample will touch down in our landing ellipse at the Utah Test and Training Range, managed by the Air Force, about 13 miles north of where we're speaking right now. Mission teams have set up a clean room just 1 mile away from us, where the sample will end its journey today. Tomorrow morning, a C-17 aircraft will take off from the runway behind us and deliver the sample to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston.
Unbelievable. Can't wait.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see that C-17. Oh, that's going to be breathtaking. We have a lot of ground to cover, and we'll be bringing it to you at For all of NASA's many missions over the years, OSIRIS-REx lives in an extremely rare category. It not only ventured out into space with cameras and sensors, but it's bringing a physical sample of the ancient solar system back to Earth for detailed analysis. Mission planners selected a small asteroid called Bennu as their destination. Following a successful touch-and-go procedure to grab a sample on October 20th, 2020, OSIRIS-REx has been making its way back to Earth. It's been a thrilling ride, already packed with technical achievements and scientific discoveries. Today's historic landing continues that saga, promising exciting research ahead. Beside our main event this morning, we've got a ton of extremely cool stuff. We'll hear from a special guest astrophysicist whom you probably recognize more for his chart toppers. We'll speak with one of the helicopter pilots about his role in getting recovery teams out to the landing site and bringing the capsule back home. And we'll even hear from the cast of the film Asteroid City. And of course, we'll give you a front row seat to the mission itself, the science, the engineering, and why a mission to gather space rocks, well, rocks,
right?
NASA's first asteroid sample return happens in less than 35 minutes. Let's now take you to Wig Mountain, where our field reporter, Sophia Roberts, is standing at the forward edge of the vast landing zone where she joins us live now. Sophia,
thank you,
paint us a picture.
Lauren and Jim. Now, it is a bright and chilly morning, but the excitement certainly is rising. Now, let me give you a lay of the land of what is going to happen today. The sample return capsule is going to hit the top of the atmosphere at approximately 8:40. It will descend through our atmosphere for 13 minutes before touchdown. Once it does touchdown, our team with the recovery team will go to the sample, or the capsule, and carefully rehearse the process. Now, I am on the edge of the landing zone that we call the ellipse. It is a huge landing zone that is larger than the size of Rhode Island. And behind me are the helicopters that will be taking those recovery teams to the capsule once it lands. Now, these teams are prepped and ready to go. We're just waiting for that capsule to arrive. Back to you, Lauren.
Wow, Sophia, I think she has the best seat in
Oh
the
my
house.
God, take me there.
I want to go there. All right, let's quick facts about the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft. Filled with fuel, the vehicle weighs more than 4,600 pounds. That's about the same size as 3 large cows. Did you know that, Jim?
I did not, and I'm afraid of those cows.
Let's stay away from the cows. With its solar arrays extended, the spacecraft is about 40 feet long, or the size of a short school bus. The solar arrays can power up to 3,000 watts, which is the same as a portable generator. Once on Bennu, the 11-foot robotic arm collected dust and pebble samples, while the cameras got up-close images of the asteroid. How about that? And then, of course, there's the SRC, or the Sample Return Capsule. The capsule that's separated from the main vehicle is currently on its way to our landing zone in the Utah desert. So, Jim, I think importantly, the team can't just open up the capsule right on the desert floor, right? What happens next?
So next, we have to safe it, we have to bag it, we have to contain it, and transport it to the clean room about a mile from here. And in that clean room, we will actually bring the sample return capsule in, take off the back shell and the heat shield, and carefully arrange to nitrogen purge that special sample container inside, so it does not introduce any contamination from Earth, because we want asteroids, not Earth.
That's right. And I love missions like this because I find my own imagination just bursting with possibilities and questions. And so with about a little bit more than 30 minutes to go before the SRC hits the top of the atmosphere, we're going to take a few minutes to dive into the nuts and bolts of the mission itself. We've got a great mission overview. I'll explain. Take a look.
OSIRIS-REx is NASA's first asteroid sample return mission. It launched in September 2016 on a journey to explore a near-Earth asteroid called Bennu. After arriving in 2018, OSIRIS-REx spent nearly 2 years orbiting Bennu, mapping and studying its rugged terrain before carrying out its primary science objective. On October 20th, 2020, the spacecraft ventured to a small crater in the asteroid's northern hemisphere. It dodged jagged rocks and towering boulders and plunged its arm into the loose surface, excavating 6 tons of debris while collecting about 250 grams of material. OSIRIS-REx stowed its bounty and closed its sample return capsule. It bid farewell to Bennu in May 2021, embarking on a 1.2 billion-mile cruise back to Earth. Now, 2 years and 4 months after leaving Bennu, OSIRIS-REx is closing in on the place where its journey began. On September 24th, the spacecraft will approach to nearly 63,000 miles from Earth. It will power up and release its sample return capsule at 4:42 a.m. Mountain Time. The capsule must be jettisoned within a narrow time frame and at just the right angle to hit its target, an area of roughly 250 square miles in Utah's West Desert. Once the capsule is away, OSIRIS-REx will fire its thrusters to avoid colliding with Earth. At 8:42 a.m., the capsule will streak into the atmosphere at a blistering 27,000 miles per hour. It will race across the western U.S. and begin to glow with heat, allowing infrared trackers on the ground to chart its progress. As it pushes deeper into the atmosphere, the capsule will rapidly decelerate, subjecting the Bennu samples to a punishing 32 Gs. About 2 minutes after entry, it will slow to Mach 1.4 and deploy its drogue parachute, stabilizing its descent. The capsule will enter special use airspace at 8:46 a.m., almost 10 miles above the Department of Defense Utah Test and Training Range. Radar stations will lock on and track it to within 30 feet of its landing site. At 8:50 a.m., the capsule will extract and deploy its main parachute 1 mile above the ground. It will make its final descent at a leisurely 11 miles per hour, like a marathon runner savoring a victory lap, before touching down in the desert soil at 8:55.
Wow, I get chills every time I see that.
Me too.
Amazing. All right, so we know you have questions, so please continue to send them to us using the hashtag AskNASA. But before we go any further, I've got a question for you, Jim. Why is the mission called OSIRIS-REx? It sounds like a new hybrid kind of dinosaur or something.
It does, but it's actually the name of an Egyptian deity, a bird deity, but it means all the stuff the mission's going to be doing. So we're going to be searching for clues to the origins of our solar system chemically, looking at how we can ground truth all the data we have for asteroids from Earth, Earth, other spacecraft right up close with samples. We're going to look at the resource potential of asteroids, metals, hydrated water and hydrated minerals, and also consider security of our planet from these kinds of objects. It's a big name with a big mission with many things it has to do. It's multiple missions in one.
Yeah, 3 missions in one, in fact. We know we have a global audience for this event, and throughout the morning we'll be taking questions submitted via social media. So let's take one now. All right, what do we have? At S4Mule_B asks, what's the significance of studying asteroids like Bennu for advancements in planetary science?
These are literally the time capsules of the early solar system. Those bits and fragments we can never get here, so we go and bring them home to connect ourselves to the place we live, our solar system. So that's one of the big takeaways of this. We will read the clues of Mother Nature on how our world works in the context of all the rest of the planetary system.
Fantastic. All right, let's take another question. What do we have? All right, from at Endanger817. How large is the sample size, and what kind of analysis will be performed?
So it's about 8 or 9 ounces. It's about the size of a baseball and a half, and the kind of analyses are amazing. There are toolkits and instruments that can look at nanoscale characteristics that you wouldn't imagine. We could see the hairs on a foot of an ant, but we'll look at those in the context of another object in the solar system. So, wow.
Wow, indeed. All right, we'll be taking some more questions throughout the morning. Okay, so let us head back to the ellipse to talk to Sophia. I understand, Sophia, you've got a critical team member with you. Take it away.
Thanks, Lauren. Yes, I am joined right now by Stu Wiley, who is the Oscar or on-scene commander of this recovery mission. Thank you for joining me, Stu.
Thanks for having me, Sophia.
All right, so you are the person who kicks off this whole process before even the recovery team gets on the ground. Can you walk us through your process?
Yeah, so essentially what's going to happen is that once the capsule is undershoot, we'll have a better idea of where it's going to land on the range. And based on that, I'll know exactly what kind of weapon systems we used in that area, what kind of tests we've done in that area. So I'll know better what kind of hazards are in the area. Once I land on the ground, I'll do an initial sweep of the area and methodically move towards the capsule and mark any kind of hazards that I find, whether it be munition hazards, of course, and or the industrial hazards, and even the environmentally sensitive areas that we have out here. So.
All right, and how did you prepare for this today?
So preparation has been in the process for a long time. Between myself and Jasmine Nakayama, we've got 40 years worth of explosive knowledge. Most of it is on this range here, so we know the ranges very well. The team and the UTR have been working together, both Lockheed and NASA, and we've been doing rehearsals so that we are more familiar with their capsule, and they're more familiar with our terrain here as well. Yeah, so.
And this is an active proving ground here. So what are the other steps that we have to ensure that our teams are safe?
Yeah, so at the Utah Test and Training Range, we do have a lot of different hazards out here. Like I said, the weapon systems that we test. We're going to keep them safe from that. We have, again, done many of the preparations with them already. They've taken safety briefings. They've been briefed on the actual items that we've dropped out here in their range safety brief. One of the hazards that we're going to be dealing with, though, is the helicopters that you see behind us, and they've been through practices getting on and off the helicopters and working in and around them. But I think the biggest hazard that we're going to have is slipping. We had some recent rain, so that I think is going to be our biggest hazard, but it could be fun too. So.
Well, wonderful. I know that you have your last preparations for the day, so I'm going to let you go, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thanks, Sophia. Stu's got a big day today.
Oh, my goodness.
A lot to do. All right, Jim, we know we have space fans from all walks of life all over the world. One super fan in particular is a well-known astrophysicist with an atypical side hustle. But I'm guessing you know him probably more from his side thing than his science thing.
Well, that's right. He's literally space royalty and rock royalty. Perfect for a mission to bring back rocks.
Just a true rock star. Let's let him speak for himself.
Hello NASA folks, space fans, asteroid aficionados. This is Brian May of Queen, as you know probably, but also immensely proud to be a team member of OSIRIS-REx. I can't be with you today, I wish I could. I'm rehearsing for a Queen tour, but my heart's there with you as this precious sample is recovered. Happy sample return day, and congratulations to all who worked on incredibly hard mission, especially and Dante, with whom we already created this beautiful book. God bless you all.
Speaking of rock stars, joining us is NASA's Lori Glaze, Planetary Science Mission Director. Welcome, Lori.
Hey, good morning.
Great to have you here, Lori.
Great to have you. And you and Jim go back quite a ways, right?
Oh, yes. Jim and I actually go back several decades, but we've been working together closely for many, many years, and it's so good to see you here.
Congratulations, Lori.
It is a really exciting day. So OSIRIS-REx is part of a larger autumn for asteroids, asteroid autumn, as we've been saying. Can you talk about some of the other missions that are happening this fall?
Happy to do that. It is really exciting. We have lots of asteroid missions, and actually 4 of them have major milestones coming up this autumn. Right on the heels of the sample return happening today, in 2 days, on September 26th, is the 1-year anniversary of a little mission you may have heard of last year called the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, demonstrated for the first time humanity's ability to deflect the path of an asteroid. How cool is that? And then coming up on October 5th is the launch of a mission called Psyche, going to visit a special asteroid called Psyche also, which is one of only about 9 of asteroids that we think are made primarily of metal, have a very high metal content, iron and nickel. And then about a month after that, on November 1st, there's going to be the first asteroid flyby of our mission called Lucy, which will ultimately visit Trojan asteroids that lead and trail Jupiter in its orbit around the Sun. But in November, we'll fly by a main belt asteroid called Dinkinesh.
Wow, check that out.
It literally did right off. But Lori, one other thing, OSIRIS-REx is a multi-purpose mission, all this great stuff you mentioned, and one of its key jobs is to focus on new defense. How does it do that? Way out there.
So actually, OSIRIS-REx gave us some really important new information about an effect, a force that occurs on asteroids called the Yarkovsky effect. And what that really is we know there's gravitational poles on the asteroids, and we can predict that with our trajectories, but the Yarkovsky effect says that the sun's radiation heats up one side of the asteroid, and then as the asteroid rotates, the radiation radiates off into the deep space, and that actually kind of acts as a force that kind of pushes back against the forward trajectory, and so it changes our predictions on where the asteroid might be. Over time, it really makes a difference, and OSIRIS-REx gave us some fantastic new measurements on that effect.
Unbelievable.
Wow, that is truly unbelievable. Nobody appreciates the planetary defense aspect more than me, Jim.
Yeah, we want to be safe.
Big fans. Really, really quickly here. This isn't the end for OSIRIS-REx. What's next?
Yeah, so really exciting. Now that the spacecraft has released the capsule successfully, about 20 minutes after that release, we are now repurposing the spacecraft for a new mission called OSIRIS-APEX, where APEX stands for Apophis Explorer, and it's off on its new mission to explore the asteroid Apophis, which is going to have a close flyby of Earth in 2029.
All right, stay tuned, everybody.
Unbelievable.
That is fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Lori, for
Thanks,
joining
Lori.
us. You're going to stick around for the show, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. This will be the biggest U.S. sample return since the Apollo mission to the moon. But this is not the first time that anyone has captured a piece of an asteroid. On the arrival of the historic OSIRIS-REx sample, we celebrate that the Japanese Space Agency, or JAXA, has already visited 2 asteroids, Itokawa in 2005 and the asteroid Ryugu in 2019. The missions Hayabusa and Hayabusa 2 proved that it could be done and paved the way for today's ambitious goals of this daring enterprise. All right, let's send it back over to James for an update on mission operations. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So everything continues to be nominal. I've been tracking the mission status here. Everyone looks dialed in, ready to go. You saw a few moments ago Sophia with Stu Wiley, our on-scene commander. He's ready to go. He understands the mission. They are ready to get out and recover that sample today. And as I mentioned earlier, just a few moments ago, actually I guess a couple hours ago at this point now, the SRC was released from the main OSIRIS-REx spacecraft. When that release took place, it was given an initial spin, which kind of preserves its angular momentum, its speed as it's coming in to Earth's atmosphere. It's similar to throwing a perfect spiral on a football, and teams are hoping for that perfect touchdown today. What you're about to see is basically the equivalent of throwing a touchdown pass over 10 football fields away and landing it perfectly in that end zone. So you can see on your screen now the mission operations team. They are just next door, dialed in, ready to go. They've been monitoring the vitals of the SRC all morning. They've been there in the room, prepared and ready to go. I'm sure they are absolutely thrilled for this moment. They might even see themselves on the screen there in a second, but they are hype and ready to go. This is the Lockheed Martin team just a little bit north of us in Waterton, Colorado. They are also dialed in. They're the ones who gave that initial command this morning to release the SRC from the main OSIRIS-REx spacecraft. You just heard from Lori that OSIRIS-REx is now on its way to its extended mission. OSIRIS-APEX visiting that near-Earth asteroid Apophis. A lot coming up in just a few moments. We're going to hit that key milestone of entry, descent, and landing. 13 minutes of punishing descent through Earth's atmosphere to us here in the Utah Test and Training Range. A lot coming up in just a few moments, but for now, back to you, Lauren and Jim.
Thanks, James. Very soon, NASA's Artemis program will be bringing us more cosmic samples to study by visiting a familiar beacon in the sky. Give us 60 seconds, and we'll give you the moon. Artemis 3 will be the first sample return mission of NASA's Artemis program, sampling rocks and regolith from one of 13 candidate regions on the moon, all located near the lunar South Pole. The Apollo lunar landers returned a treasure chest of samples that taught us about the history of the solar system, dating back about 4 billion years ago. Artemis missions will explore areas near the South Pole on the rim of the moon's oldest basin, the enormous South Pole Aitken Basin. Artemis will explore areas nearly 1 billion years older than those explored by Apollo. Lunar samples from Artemis 3 and future missions will help scientists interpret the impact history of the moon and Earth, as well as increase our understanding of planetary processes. OSIRIS-REx, the first U.S. mission to collect a sample from an asteroid, will return samples from asteroid Bennu. The rocks and dust collected will offer generations of scientists a window into a time when the sun and planets were forming over 4.5 billion years ago. Samples from OSIRIS-REx and Artemis could rewrite our understanding of the evolution of the solar system. And that's a look at your Artemis Moon Minute. Boy, Jim, how can you not get excited about that?
Oh my gosh.
Oh boy, that's going to be so cool. All right, Sophia is standing at the forward edge of the recovery zone with an update. Take it away, Sophia.
All right, thank you, Lauren. We are under 20 minutes away from EDL. That is entry, descent, and landing. And I don't think there's anyone here on planet Earth who has anticipated this day more than the principal investigator of the mission, Dante Loretta. Thank you for giving us time here today.
It's great to be here.
All right, so you are here on Wig Mountain because you're on the recovery team.
That's right.
Can you walk us through what you're going to be doing today?
So I'm part of the environmental sampling group. From day one, this mission has paid attention to keeping that sample pristine. And we're going to come down. We had some rain on Thursday. Most likely we're going to be encountering mud out there. We're also interested in the air quality and any water that might be standing, just so in the very rare event that any of that material somehow comes into contact with the sample, we have a record of it and it won't compromise our science.
Oh, wonderful. And I think one of the really exciting things about a mission like this, especially with you working with the University of Arizona, is that you're partnering with educational institutions. So can you talk a little bit about the legacy that a mission like this has?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a professor at the University of Arizona in the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory, and our history goes all the way back to the Apollo missions. The founder of our lab, Gerard Kuiper, mapped the moon, helped pick the Apollo landing sites and the Surveyor landing sites, and we have been involved in every major NASA planetary mission since then. And really the best part of having a university lead a program like this is that it's a great training ground for the next generation. I've been on this program almost 20 years, and I've watched multiple generations of students grow up become professionals, either join the team. We always take our team members on board when we need to fill roles, or off into other careers in aerospace engineering, science, and many other disciplines.
It's really great to foster those incredible questions about our universe.
Absolutely.
And I know that you need to get back to your team to go on that recovery process.
The moment's almost here.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck out there today.
Thank you.
All right, back to you, Lauren.
Great, thanks, Sophia. Wow, I can't wait for Dante to get his moment in the sun.
Goes Dante.
That is amazing. All right, so Jim, the whole OSIRIS-REx spacecraft is not coming back today, right? It's just a part of it.
That's right. This is the whole spacecraft, 40 feet long, the size of a school bus. But this special little thing here, the sample return capsule, is bringing home the goodies. And that's what we've just released, and it will be entering the atmosphere, and you'll be hearing all about it. And the samples were collected at the asteroid back in October of 2020 from this TAGSAM thing that inserted them in the capsule, and the capsule was released. So that's what comes home. The rest of this goes on to Apophis.
That's right. We just heard Lori talk about that. But let's move over and take a look at this this replica SRC capsule. Now, this was an engineering model that was used in tests a few weeks ago for a drop test. Can you talk a little bit about the engineering of this?
That's right. This is a very special spacecraft, just like a small version of what we use to bring crews back when they come back home to Earth from the space station. It has a heat shield. It's about 30 inches across, so it's pretty big, weighs over 100 pounds, has a back shell, and inside it has the goodies, the sample return canister and the sample cap, the small sample canister. So this is the vehicle that brings those samples protected from all those changes in environment from the top of the atmosphere, 13 minutes of descent to the touchdown point that we're waiting for today. This is a very special spacecraft.
It absolutely is. And it also was used in a drop test, as I mentioned. Let's take a look at some of that footage now.
Right. So just a couple weeks ago, we dropped this replica, this engineering test unit, from 5,000 feet with parachute deployment and went through all the operations, the choreography we need to actually make sure we can do it today. And that's what's going to be coming up. And it worked wonderfully. We inflated the big 24-foot parachute. It's loaded down to the surface at 11 miles an hour. We went through all the recovery operations, the safing, the bagging, and the containment to come over to the clean room here, where we'll be doing that today to make sure those samples are from Bennu, so we can study them here on Earth and not contaminated by our wonderful Earth.
That's right, and you know it's the actual SRC that they use because it is covered in dirt, as you can see on here.
This is dirt, scratch marks.
All the scratch marks, yeah.
It's a rough ride,
the real deal.
but we need it to come home. This is a real sort of homecoming.
Right. So there's a lot of science in missions like this. Not only is the SRC a treasure chest with material from the ancient solar system, but the mission itself is a platform for vital research about a range of things that you might not have expected.
SciFly's mission is to collect visual, infrared, and spectral data on spaceflight vehicles, including the OSIRIS-REx sample return capsule on its return to Earth. This gives engineers and scientists unique insight into our most challenging questions about hypersonic fluid dynamics by providing data critical to flight safety systems. The scientifically calibrated in-flight imagery team uses ground-based sensors and instruments flying on various aircraft to image asteroid sample returns, launch abort systems, parachute tests, rocket launches, and capsule returns, including Artemis 1 on both launch and re-entry. The data we capture provides engineers with information on vehicle performance relative to what computational tools and wind tunnel tests predict. It takes extensive planning to get it right. Upon its return from the asteroid belt, the OSIRIS-REx capsule will be traveling at 12 kilometers per second, or about 27,000 miles per hour. That's nearly twice as fast as objects coming back from low Earth orbit, and it will be among the 4 fastest human-made objects ever to fly in Earth's atmosphere. In partnership with the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, Rocket Technologies International, and universities in Australia and Germany, SciFly is coordinating 3 ground stations and 4 aircraft to collect data on the sample return capsule's trajectory, heat shield performance, and the plasma environment surrounding the capsule as it speeds to the surface. All of this will help NASA understand its performance and help future planetary entry missions succeed.
Joining us now is NASA's Kate Calvin, Chief Scientist and Climate Advisor. Kate, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It is wonderful to have you. All right, so as NASA's Chief Scientist, you're looking at the big picture. How much teamwork across the agency has made to, a day like today a possibility?
A mission like this takes a big team, both within NASA and without. So outside of NASA. So the mission is managed by Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. The sample is going to be going to the Johnson Space Center in Texas after it leaves here. Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama does the overall program management. Outside of NASA, we have collaborations both in industry, academia, and international. So Lockheed Martin is doing built the spacecraft and doing flight ops. Kinetics is doing navigation. We have a science team led by the University of Arizona. And then we have
recovery operations.
Canada and Japan.
Helicopter 1 has
All of them
departed
are really
wing
critical to
to
us.
station
And
keep
I'll just
outside
stop
the
right
landing
there.
ellipse.
We got a confirmation that helicopters 1 and 2 have just taken off. Very exciting. All right.
So, Kate, one other thing. As an earth science and expert on how our planet works in climate, can you tell us how this asteroid mission, the sample to return, might impact how we understand life on Earth, how it evolved, and how climate issues now might be involved?
Yeah, so this asteroid Bennu may record some of the earliest history of our solar system. So scientists are looking at it to help us understand planet formation and the origins of water and carbon, which led to life here on Earth.
That's incredible.
That is incredible. And, Kate, I know you've been to several launches. That's our typical bread and butter. But this is more of a homecoming. How does that feel to you?
It's great. The environment here is so nice. Being with the team and thinking about, this spacecraft launched 7 years ago. And now there's all this amazing science just
The team has really been working hard. And are you going to stick around for the show? Fantastic. All right, well, Kate, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Kate, for all you do.
Thank you so much. This seems like a perfect time to dig into some more information about Bennu. Bennu is one of the main asteroids, a near-Earth asteroid with an orbital brings it in close proximity to us here on Earth. Bennu is about 500 meters in diameter, which is taller than the Empire State Building. It rotates upside down on its axis compared to Earth, with a tilt of over 177 degrees. Scientists chose to study Bennu because
Recovery operations. Helicopter 2 has departed WIG to station keep outside the landing ellipse.
All right, so you just heard that they have departed WIG. Excellent progress. Fantastic. All right. Moving on, it isn't as smooth a surface as we initially thought. It's actually covered in pebbles and marked by these large rocks and boulders nearly everywhere. One boulder in particular that OSIRIS-REx had to navigate around was nicknamed Mount Doom and was the size of a 2-story building. Bennu holds the Guinness World Record of the smallest object to be orbited by a spacecraft. Now let's get an update from Sophia, who is standing on the edge of the ellipse. Take it away, Sophia.
Okay, the helicopters have already just departed, so the team is already in the recovery process, or at least the beginning of it. But right now, we're waiting precisely where the capsule's going to land before the rest of the teams head on over to that location. Now we're about under 10 minutes away from the capsule hitting the top of our atmosphere, and we are eagerly anticipating this largest sample of ancient solar system material that the last Apollo mission in 1972. So that is 51 years since we've had such a pristine and large sample of ancient solar system material. It's a really big day for science, and we're just in the beginning phases of today, but we are certainly excited to hear about what will happen and see those parachutes finally descend through our atmosphere. We're certainly excited. This is just one phase of this amazing mission. We send it back to you, Lauren.
See the operational milestones we're expecting throughout the morning. SRC separation already happened, and the capsule is now heading for its rendezvous with Earth's atmosphere. Jim, it always appears like these operations are simply inevitable. We grabbed the sample, we flew it back to Earth, we're headed in for landing, but it's never that simple, is it?
No, not at all. And so we have a lot of critical events that take massive so no Earth atmosphere and microbes get involved. That'll happen today, here in a few hours. And then tomorrow we transfer to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where all the fun happens at the Astromaterials Curational Facility, where we've done moon rocks and samples of interplanetary dust and lots of things. Those colleagues in a special clean room perfectly designed for this mission will unpack those precious samples in the small sample canister, the small device that was used on the end of the TAGSAM, and they will go through a process to get it checked out, to do early reconnaissance, and to protect it very carefully.
That is incredible. And they built that whole clean room. No other asteroid samples before. This is the first one.
First ever.
First ever. As the SRC approaches the edge of Earth's atmosphere, we are just moments away from the world's largest ever asteroid sample return. Jim, what are you feeling right now?
I am literally tingling all over with exhilaration. This is a small step for a capsule and a giant leap for science.
It really is, and if that's one thing we can impart, that is it. This is a huge, huge milestone, a great achievement. So this is it. We are just 15 minutes away from the OSIRIS-REx sample return, a journey of 7 years and nearly 4 billion miles. The work of thousands culminates in this moment. Let's turn it over to our mission commentator, James Traley, to take us through the final moments. James, we're all yours.
Yeah, Lauren, buckle up and get ready for the ride of entry, descent, and landing. This is 13 minutes of crazy descent, punishing, crazy deceleration of our spacecraft, starting at 27,000 miles per hour when it enters into Earth's atmosphere, and eventually slowing to a leisurely 11 miles per hour as it descends and lands on the Utah Test and Training Range.
Recovery operations. Helicopters 1 and 2 have arrived at the holding location.
So good news, our helicopters are ready to go and begin those recovery operations just as soon as we have confirmation of touchdown here. And as the sun begins to rise in the west coast, the SRC is going to be streaking across the atmosphere above San Francisco, California, about 82 miles in altitude. It's going to be coming in hot, over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, almost a couple seconds after it hits that atmosphere. That's about half as warm as the surface of the sun, to give you some context. But don't worry, our sample will be safe and sound. Within, we have a heat shield, which is made of a phenolic impregnated carbon ablator. It's a very fancy term to describe what's going on with this heat shield. It basically ablates away or burns away any kind of heat flux that develops on that outer shell, making sure that our sample is safe and cool within. Similar technology that we use with astronauts coming back from the moon or any kind of other landers that we have going into planets and moons. So we're just a couple moments away from this key moment. It's going to be very exciting the next couple 13 minutes here, and you'll hear a couple call-outs come in from just next door in our mission operations team as they begin to get us ready for this key moment. It's a journey of 3.86 billion miles getting reduced to the scale of mere miles, 82 miles above the surface of the Earth in San Francisco. A couple key events are going to happen as soon as we get into the Earth's atmosphere. Very quickly in, we're going to deploy our drogue parachute. This is for stability. Stabilizes our descent and makes sure that we are continuing to target that landing ellipse that is here in the Utah Test and Training Range. It is a 36.5 by 8 mile landing ellipse that is here, marked out for that recovery operation. You see on your screen now the mission ops team eager at the edge of their seats for that first call out of Earth atmospheric entry. Very exciting moment coming up in just a few seconds here. We're about 20 seconds away. You see the team at Lockheed now, all standing, ready on the edge of their seats. This team, I'll remind you, just a few hours ago, gave that command to release the SRC on this long journey. It's been on its own for 4 hours. There's nothing we can do at this point. It's coming in, rain or shine.
EO milestone. The SRC has entered the Earth's atmosphere. UTTR tracking assets have required.
And here we go. Start your stopwatch right now. We are 13 minutes of entry, descent, and landing. We have that expected milestone of entering into the Earth's atmosphere. We can see the team at Lockheed, and we actually have a visual now. This is from our infrared tracking camera on the WB-57, our high-altitude plane, at about 47,000 feet MSL, mean sea level, getting a great view of that SRC heating up as it enters into Earth's atmosphere, the punishing deceleration that spacecraft, that SRC is experiencing right now. As it comes in at about 27,650 miles an hour, you can see it glowing brightly in the sky. In just a few moments, we're going to reach peak heating and peak deceleration. That's at 32 G-forces, punishing G-force on our SRC, a phenomenal view of that streaking SRC coming in across the sky. At this point, we've entered in over San Francisco, California, and are very quickly going to be approaching the Utah Test and Training Range just a little bit further to the east. entry was at.
EDO milestone. SRC is experiencing maximum heating and maximum deceleration.
So you just heard right there, we're experiencing that 5,000 degree Fahrenheit maximum heating, burning scalding hot on that heat shield that is protecting our sample within, and maximum deceleration that is at 32 g-force, punishing deceleration from Earth's atmosphere, the drag forces that are acting on that SRC. Once again, as I mentioned, that sample is safe and sound within that SRC, that sample return capsule, as it comes in, burning through Earth's atmosphere. You can see our high-altitude plane searching for that SRC. You can see it faintly on your screen there. Our next milestone will be expecting that drogue parachute deployment. That'll be at about 102,300 feet altitude. And as I mentioned before, that will stabilize our descent and slow us from hypersonic to subsonic speeds as we continue to target the Utah test and training range.
Expected EDO milestone. SRC commands drogue parachute deploy.
So we heard that command to deploy the drogue parachute. Waiting to see that visual confirmation, but that is at 102,300 feet. And a side note, at this time, 8:44 a.m. Mountain Time, the OSIRIS Apex spacecraft is at its closest approach to Earth. That will be on to its extended mission visiting the asteroid Apophis in the year 2029, continuing this incredible mission at another world. And in just a few moments, we should enter into special use airspace at approximately 8:46 a.m. That's going to be at 10 miles off the deck here at Utah Test and Training Range. You can still see that SRC on your screen very faintly in the distance. Still quite warm, that fireball that literally was a ball of plasma just a few moments ago when it first entered into the Earth's atmosphere. That SRC is nearly 3 feet wide, 1.6 feet tall. It's a small object, so quite a challenge to track.
उधर जाके अपना कर, मेरा जगह ये, मेरा जगह है। ओए, हट जा, हट जा, हट जा, मुझे मिला, मुझे मिला, मुझे मिला, मुझे मिला, मुझे मिला, अंकल आपने यहाँ फेंका ना, मुझे मिला है ना पहले, मुझे मिला है। 5,000 का बेच रहे? 5,000 का? हाँ। ला दे 5,000, कैश दियो कैश। पूरा साबुत है, ये देख ले पूरा साबुत है। कहीं से फटा हुआ नहीं है ये कागज। ये पूरा साबुत है 5,000। हाँ ये पूरा साबुत दे रहा हूँ मैं, ठीक है? हाँ ये तेरा 5,000 का। उधर जाके अपना कर, मेरा जगह ये, मेरा जगह है। ओए हट जा, हट जा, हट जा, मुझे मिला, मुझे मिला।